Today is August 20th, 2020. Mr. Zensky, have a roll call, please.
Mr. Grippo.
Here.
Ms. Hallen.
Here.
Ms. Ham.
Here.
Ms. Harrigan.
Here.
Mr. Martelli.
Here.
Mr. Perugini.
Here.
Mr. White.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, everyone. I ask that we stand for the pledge, and Jeff, I assume you will display the flag as usual.
I will.
So I pledge of allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which
One
it
nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
For all. Fellow board members, administration staff, Steve, and I know Maura will be joining us too. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Especially Steve and Maura for taking time out of your busy day to join us this evening. We very much appreciate that. For those watching, again, thank you. I know Mike will give us an idea of how many are watching tonight. Before we get into the agenda, just a couple reminders that we are streaming via YouTube Live. Public can and should submit questions via email, and the email address is cpscovid19 at Cheshire K12.ct.us. There's a correspondence section, audience section in the agenda, but as we go through the presentations, I know Carol and Jeff are monitoring the mailbox. We'll try to get to all those relevant questions throughout the meeting, but please don't be shy. Send in your questions. We received some already. And for those that sent questions to the board or administration the last couple of weeks on reopening, the administration has all those, and I expect most of those to be answered after the course of this evening. So with that being said, our agenda, we decided to do a couple things this evening. One is you've heard quite a bit from the administration, some members of the reopening team over the last couple months in particular, about reopening options and plans for the schools. And I know Jeff and Marlene and team are going to take us through some updates to that. We thought it'd be great too to have representatives from Chesapeake for the Health District. Primarily, as a number of questions we're receiving really comes down to protocol and procedures, contact tracing, some other what-if scenarios that I know our health business will be working with the administration on. So when Maura joins us, I know she'll be able to walk us through her presentation. Steve is here as well. I don't envy sports parents out there, as we saw some back and forth over the last 2 weeks, whether sports being played, not played. But in lieu of that, we thought having our AD here, Steve Phone, to help kind of walk through what a day in the life of that might look like, and maybe talk a little about some of the protocols and things that to consider. So we have some esteemed colleagues tonight to help us through this journey. That being said, Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you kick off the presentations under section 2.
Thank you, Tony. You mentioned some of our guests tonight. With Maura running a little bit late, I know how tight her schedule is these days. I'll ask Steve if it's okay with everybody to present first on some of the reopening with the athletics for the fall. And I know this is all subject to change. CIAC happens to be meeting this evening, but I know Steve will get that too. But Mr. Trifone, if you want to present screen, you can walk us through it, please.
Thank you, Jeff. And thank you, everybody. As Jeff mentioned, there is a meeting going on as we speak at the CIAC with Department of Public Health. I do have my other computer on because they said they will shoot out an email as soon as we get information. So you may get it hot off the press as it comes up to us. But what I'd like to do is present some information of questions that have been asked by me by parents and things that I've shared with athletes and coaches so far. Hopefully they'll answer some of your questions and maybe prompt some other concerns that people may have that we're addressing as well. So I'll jump on here and share my screen with you. Can everybody see the screen there?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
We can see it well.
yes.
Okay,
Perfect.
okay. So, all right, so what I'd like to do is just kind of give you an overview of what we have put in place so far and some of our concerns as we move along, as this season either comes about or does not come about. So we'll begin. So the big question that I always get, I probably get this asked about 4 or 5 times a day, will there be high school sports? We'll find out tonight. So the CIAC, along with the Department of Public Health, they're making the decision on a recommendation, and that meeting is taking place this evening. An earlier meeting with CIAC stated that we may get information tonight, possibly tomorrow. And of course, I'll make that available to everybody as soon as we get that. So another question is, through this pandemic, why would we want to continue sport activities? There's a lot of reasons why. Obviously, we realize that sport activities provide outlets for kids. It helps with their social development. Probably the most important part of it is their social, emotional end of it, their mental health. Teens without structure, we found that they have shown an increase in depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. University of Wisconsin did a study in July 2020, and they found out that over 2/3 of high school teens without structure have shown an increase in these items of depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. So we do want to offer these kids some outlet. And if sports is an outlet, then so be it. So the CIAC allowed us to set up a summer re-socialization plan to get kids back into some type of re-socialization with either their coaches and or their friends. So we assembled cohorts starting early July. And the purpose was to acclimate them back into sports, back into hot weather as well, and also condition our athletes under a coach's supervision. It was optional. It wasn't part of a team tryout. And the good news is that there were 39,000 athletes in Connecticut that participated in this, and there were no cases reported during the summer cohort training. So that's good news. So the cohort organization, it keeps our numbers low. They're easier to social distance. There were no more than 10 or 15 athletes per cohort. Those athletes remained in their cohort once they were developed. There was no crossover. Athletes could not change because they wanted to go with a friend or they couldn't make that night. So they had to stay within that cohort. Every athlete, there was recorded health status of each athlete, and I'll get more into that. And of course, they needed parent permission sign off for a child to participate, which also gave us access to their physical and given parents information as far as some of the guidelines that we would be doing to protect their child. What the CIAC developed along with athletic directors is we did a self-reporting cohort. So student athletes would report daily to their coach, and the coach would record their current health status. We would find out things about were they feeling feverish, sore throat, headache, etc. You can read those. There were a list of things that we checked off a yes or no. Any yes, that athlete was sent back home to their parents and their parent was contacted. We kept all records and we're still keeping those records. And the reason why is because it's a cohort. Should we have a case that does pop up positive, we have that record of what kids were involved in that cohort. Of course, any personal information is not disclosed with anybody. It was all confidential. So what are the responsibilities of each athlete? They have to come to and from practice with a mask on. They have to check in with their coach for their self-monitoring report. They must bring a personal water bottle marked with their name on it. I'm requesting that the bottle has a minimum of 32 ounces. We're requesting them to come with a drawstring bag or a backpack, whatever is available to them. Would like in that a towel, a small sanitizer bottle, their own personalized sanitizer bottle, and also a spare mask. I have additional masks, and we'll keep those available for athletes should they need them, and coaches have available masks as well. They cannot share any items with other athletes. It's important that our coaches really stress to our athletes that outside of the team, we really want them to reduce their social contact with other kids. Their cohort is their team, And if they really want to play sports, they have to avoid going to any parties where there's a large group of kids, where there's no social distancing taking place, etc. If they're feeling ill, we do not want them at our cohort or with the team. They're to notify the coach. And all personal equipment, whatever is brought, must go home that night for daily cleaning and sanitizing. And that's where parents can help us to make sure that their children are cleaning and washing their clothes that they've worn to practice every day. What about our coaches? They have responsibilities as well. They will always have a mask on in the presence of athletes. They also have to have a personal water bottle. We're asking them to bring a bag with a towel, personal towel for themselves, a small sanitizer bottle for themselves as well, and of course a spare mask. They will supply a water jug or jugs for teams to replenish their bottles, and only our coaches fill those jugs. At times in the past, maybe we had a manager or a team member fill up the water jugs. Only a coach will handle the jug, and only that coach only will take care of the water jugs. Coaches will sanitize all items at the end of practice or a game, whether it's balls or shared equipment. I've been working with Vince Massiana and Rich Clavette about getting sanitizing equipment, so those are available to our coaches. Of course, they will complete the self-screening of our athletes at the start of each session, and our teams are divided by cohorts with coaches, and the coaches will stick with those cohorts throughout the entire season. So they are responsible for those 10 or 15 students and make sure that they are self-screening prior to the start of each session. The nice thing about this is that we're doing a self-screening on a daily basis of students. So I think that helps as far as school, and not only sports, but as far as school as well. Those records would be kept throughout the season. And of course, coaches are not allowed to share any personal items with anyone, none of their personal items as well. If a student does not have a mask, they're not going to share a mask out of their pocket. They'll have to go and get one of the newer masks. Also, we're asking our coaches outside of their team, we're asking them to reduce their social contact as well. We want our coaches to stay healthy. Again, if we're going to ask our students to be socially distant and stick within cohorts, we're asking our coaches to do the same. And also, coaches are to remain home if not feeling well and notify the athletic office. That's why we have assistant coaches. That's why head coaches can fill in where assistants are missing, etc. What are our responsibilities for masks? Masks are not required when an athlete is participating in a drill during practice, any conditioning activities, aerobic or anaerobic, and of course during a contest. They're more than welcome to wear a mask if they want to, but they do not have to. When they have to wear a mask is coming to practice and leaving practice. So as they leave back to their vehicle or home, they should have a mask on. If they're sitting on the bench or a seat, if they're in a team meeting, on the sideline, standing there, they must have a mask on. Oops, sorry, I jumped ahead there, folks. So, and coaches and managers are going to be wearing a mask at all times. So how do we enforce all this? I've met with our fall coaches on numerous occasions so far, and they're all in agreement of what's going on. They want the season as much as anyone else. Coaches are responsible to enforce all mandates, and we call them mandates. These aren't recommendations, these are mandates. They need to enforce the mandates for social distance, masks when masks are required, make sure the teams are properly hydrated, and monitoring the health of the team. Sideline management is just as important of everything else that's going on. So when kids are on the sideline, we have to make sure that they are social distancing. If you stretched your arms out, that is 6 feet, approximately about 3 feet in arms. So if kids are stretching their arms out, their 3-foot arm and my 3-foot arm is giving us about 6 feet. So now your sidelines are no longer 20 yards wide. They may stretch from 10-yard line to 10-yard line, depending on how many kids we have there, but they are going to be social distancing. I am attending team virtual meetings to reiterate mandates to parents and athletes. Recently, I just attended a football meeting where we had probably 95% of our athletes and just as many parents, and we were able to go over all of these rules and regulations. I will also visit practices and make sure and observe mandates, make sure they're being observed. My supervision or anyone who's filling in for me at all of our home contests. I will constantly be meeting with coaches to review any updates as they come through, either through the CIAC or through Chesprocot. And parents can really be assistants to us. As I mentioned, when those articles come home every night, make sure that the athlete is wiping down their equipment, making sure that they're changing their clothes that they're going to wear for the next day, washing what they brought home that night. And of course, any athlete that does not follow these mandates, our coaches are going to send them home if they're non-compliant or contact their parents. So our coaches are pretty serious about what's going on. And we've noticed that the feedback from our cohorts, so are our athletes. So there's a good foundation in place already. We have created a sports advisory. So it consists of district administrators, our school nurse, athletic trainer, school physician, myself, and coaches are represented on it. We will meet regularly once the season begins, should it begin, and during this season as well. And the purpose is just to maintain constant communication among the leadership, make sure we address any concerns as they arise, because things are constantly in flux, and keeping everybody informed on the best practices to help our athletic programs. Question always has come up about transportation. First of all, our contest, the league has regionalized schedules to really cut down on travel time. So we are going to be playing schools around us, and schools that we've played before in the past that are just over 30, 40 miles, we will not be playing them. Our schedules have been reduced. The season has been shortened. So we're playing a reduced season, a shortened season. Everything will be pretty much over by November 15th. And unfortunately, if football does go on, there's no Thanksgiving Day game. Transporting athletes, we will transport athletes per our district busing guidelines, whether that requires certain amount of seats being taken. Masks will be worn on buses. Parents may opt to drive their athletes to and from contests. And this question comes up quite a bit with athletes. They cannot drive themselves to and from contests. So it's either a parent or they're taking the bus. That's going to limit also the size of teams that we take, just because of the number of seats that are available on buses. We will probably most likely not be using locker room, but at times we will have to use a locker room, and it will be minimized. Example would be our swim team. They start practice at 2:30. That's just when the pool is available. There is no locker room at the pool, so they will have to change into their bathing suits at the high school. We will make sure that a locker room is available for them, and that locker room will be marked where they can and cannot sit, and space them apart in that locker room. There's no overnight storage in locker rooms, and we are going to ask our athletes, we are sending all of our students home, other than those teams that may have to practice right after school, such as our swim team. The other team that will practice right after school will be our cross-country team, only because we don't want our athletes on the road late at night. So every other athlete, we're going to send them home. They're going to come back, and they're going to be dressed for their sport. And they will leave and not leave any equipment here. So all clothing and equipment must be taken home and cleaned that night. What about spectators? So this is always a hot question that comes up, and I get asked this daily as well. Right now, spectators are not allowed in any indoor event. We are not allowing any people inside the school building other than students and faculty. So therefore, we don't want to bring in spectators into our buildings in the evening as well. CIAC is recommending no spectators at any outdoor contest, but districts may develop their own plan. So the Southern Connecticut Conference, we are looking to develop a common plan, whereas if we were traveling to Amity High School, our spectators will have the same option there as they would at our school. If all of us decide no spectators, then we're hoping that the entire league does the same. Because of that, what we did is I had installed what they call National Federation of High School Pixel-Lock camera. We have one on our game field, and this summer we put one into our main gym. Basically, it's a camera that follows action. It's a high-tech device. It's It'll allow movement to take place without the camera moving. It's pretty cool. So parents can sign up and join into that and view all of our contests live as they happen. If they sign up for that, any school that does have the Pixel camera, they can watch that game as well. So if we're playing Hamden at Hamden, they have Pixel cameras. If they are signed up to view it, they can watch games at Hamden High if we're playing there. I'll get information out to parents if and when our fall season does begin. So again, information changes almost on a daily basis. We update the high school website under athletics with information as it comes in. We send emails to parents who have registered their child for sports so far. As it becomes available, we're sending email updates to parents. And we do ask that parents remain in contact with their child's coach. They have a lot of questions and a lot of concerns, like most parents do with their children, not only athletes, but just kids going to school. And also I ask parents, contact the athletic department. I'll be more than happy to meet with parents. I'll be more than happy to go on a virtual meet with them, whatever need be, just so we can kind of make sure everybody's on the same page if and when the season moves along, and we're just trying to keep our kids safe. So that's kind of a summary of what I had there. I'm not sure if anyone has any questions. I hope it helped answer some questions as we went along. So what I'll do is...
Steve, thank you. Definitely helped. I know there's some questions. Tim had one followed by Faith. So go ahead, Tim.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Tony. I'm just looking at the questions. Yeah, you had mentioned there was a summer program and there was nothing reported during it. Was there any testing done during it?
We did not do any testing. So I don't know if individual students were tested. We wouldn't get that information, but the CIAC didn't report any information to us of any positive cases within the cohorts.
Okay. Okay. Did the CIAC do any testing?
No, they did not.
Okay. In general, you're talking about fewer kids playing, it sounds like, because you said you're going to have limited space on buses. So you're going to be going with like a varsity team, maybe a JV team, but you're probably talking, is that fair to say you probably have fewer kids playing anyway, or at least going to away events?
You're right, Tim. That's what happens. So our travel teams would be smaller.
Okay.
Our varsity teams will be smaller. And what I mean by that is normally, example, we may dress a freshman JV team to attend the varsity game. That would not take place. We don't want all of our athletes along the sidelines, if at all possible. So it'll probably just be a varsity team traveling to a varsity event. So trying to keep those numbers low. Right now, our numbers that have signed up are pretty good. They're a little below average right now, but of course the season hasn't begun and school hasn't begun, and a lot of people will probably sign up and register as we get closer.
Okay. And one more question. I don't know if this is for you, Steve, or for Jeff. I basically had asked Jeff this question like a month ago, but I want to revisit it. So at the beginning of this year, there were several families contacted me about high school coaches lacking permits. One thing led to another, and it was obvious that at least one specific coach had not been permitted for 8 of the past 10 years for several different reasons. With that in mind, I recently had a resident tell me that he had visited the State Department of Education website and looked up our current head coaches. He mentioned that probably half of them were not listed on the state website as being permitted, suggesting that the other half are not permitted. How can parents be confident that the high school coaches are properly permitted?
Right now, Tim, I can tell you that all of our coaches going into the fall season are properly permitted. Some of our winter and spring coaches will most likely have to update their first aid and CPR, in which I do. So I do that once the season begins, and we'll make sure that those permits are updated as well. We've developed some guidelines to follow those. They're in place, so I think we're in pretty good shape.
Okay.
When you, I would also add that when you look on the state certification website, which isn't just coaches, it's any certified person in Connecticut, it asks you to enter the district. Sometimes when you enter the district name, they don't show up if it wasn't keyed in. If you leave it blank, sometimes they do show up. It's kind of finky that way for teachers and administrators, for everybody.
Okay. The last thing I'm just going to put out there, and this probably would be better if Maura was here, is I'm looking for a way to just reconcile 5 months of social distancing with extracurricular activities that have contact. I can't figure that out in my mind. It just doesn't make any sense. And I appreciate everything. I want to say that, Steve, I appreciate everything that you just went through. And it sounds like really good things that you're doing. But to me, the bottom line is contact or no contact. And that's difficult for me to figure out how that would work.
We're all, this is all new to all of us.
Yeah.
We all are really trying to help each other guide through this. Of course, we want to do it in the safest way for kids. If we can offer them extracurricular activities, so be it. So a lot of times it's baby steps, Tim, as you know.
No, I know. And I think there's certain things you could do. I ran cross country with Rob Schaefer in high school, and it's always crowded right at the front of the line. You could actually space it out more than that. It wouldn't, a lot of the runners wouldn't like it, but you could do certain things that could improve the situation, I think.
So that's a great example. So each sport committee has come up with new guidelines under COVID, at least for the fall. Example for cross country. You have to have a minimum of a 6-foot path for cross country races. Our current path, our home meet, is not 6 feet wide, so we're looking to change it. We may be running our home meets at Bartland Park. We've already walked it. We can utilize the Chapman Field over there. So that's a perfect example. You're only allowed to run certain amount of kids at a certain time. They're going to be spaced. So those are good points. Each sport is going to have its own unique change that's going to take place this year.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Steve, Faith, and I think Adam after, and then Ann, but we'll start with Faith.
Okay. Thanks, Steve, for your presentation. Question, in your summer program, was there face-to-face, head-to-head contact, or were they all socially distanced?
No, it was all social distance. It was just conditioning, so there was no skill work taking place.
Okay.
So
Thanks. And so specific, you said you're trying to develop a team. Can you give us an estimate with specific, this sounds like an oxymoron, specific numbers? What are we looking at, especially for football? Because 6 feet with, even 40 players, because you got offense, defense, and all that, times 2 teams, you've got to have a lot of space for social distancing. How are you going to do that in a game?
You do. It's games will be interesting. That's something that's a concern of people, because you've got 11 on 11. You're not going to have social distancing per se between everybody. But what we can control is we can control our sidelines. We can control the number of kids that are just standing around. So as I mentioned before, varsity teams will be practicing varsity, JV will be practicing JV. That separates. Now you're taking a team of 60 kids and you're breaking it down into probably 30 kids. So you're going to spread them out a little bit more. So practices can be a little bit more controlled than contests. And I think those things right now are being discussed at the CIAC office.
Okay. And then just, sorry, if UConn is calling its football season, and what message does that send to us? And I understand the need for social emotional welfare, but if we are going through hoops in school, I think we need to take a real serious look at what we're doing after school as well.
It's a good question, Faith. And I'm not going to disagree with that. The one thing that we know about colleges versus high schools is colleges, kids are coming from all over the country. And a lot of those states that they're coming from are quarantine states for us. Our kids are here in the same town. That's why we're trying to regionalize games, where we're trying to keep kids playing the same people. A little bit different, but there's still some concerns. I am not going to argue that.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Faith. And I think you were recognizing that Maura is here. Maura, thank you for joining us this evening. We're just talking about the sports part of the presentation. So again, we appreciate you taking time out this evening. We know you're very busy these days. So thanks for being here. Adam, you had a question.
I did have a question, but now that Maura's here, I think I'll wait to ask her because it was about testing. Because the governor gave some new information today that I thought would be relevant to athletics. So I'm not sure who to ask it to. So I guess I'll wait to ask Maura to see if maybe she presents something about it, and I'll hold my question. Thank you.
Can you
Sure.
hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
No, thank you.
I apologize that I'm late, and I'm sorry if I missed something important. I just wanted to give a very fast 5-minute update. As many of you know, the health department has been working in COVID mode pandemic since December, starting with the Cheshire Academy and their students with international. I want to say that through all of this, through March, April, May, June, we've had many different businesses, organizations have openings at different times. So just like the school is opening, we had to do that with the salons. We had to do that with the food. We had to do that with the camps. And I will tell you that you are not unlike anybody else, except you're much larger and there's a lot more to it. But it's kind of the same thing in my eyes, that I'm sitting here as your guidance. I am not Dr. Fauci, but I am, I took epidemiology classes, but I'm not an epidemiologist, but I've been in public health for a long time, and I understand the mitigation, and I understand the studies that help, if we do these mitigations, lower the risk of people spreading the disease and contacting the disease. So I have been working with all these different people all through the different steps. Schools have been a little challenging because you have your own issues with your sizes and your infrastructures, but I want you to know that working with your nurses and your medical director is not like nothing I've done already. Opening up camps was very challenging. I had to sit there and hold Holiday Hill, which is a very large camp, and they were having students without masks. So that was very challenging. We went through 5 or 6 moments where we thought we had a close call, but we didn't. And I explained earlier to Dr. Solon that they were kind of our guinea pigs. We were going to see how they did, and they fared really well. I will tell you, sports, when it started opening up, we were very hopeful. We walked every time there were sector guidelines. We went through all of them with every single agency that was going to enforce them. I want to remind all of you that, I have 3 towns, 3 different school systems, 3 different everything. So, and there's only 8 of us. So it was a lot for me to digest. So I am not an absolute expert on necessarily the Cheshire Public Schools plan, but I read it to make sure that the public health mitigation was present and there, because we know that if that plan has that, we are going to be much more successful. And having gone through and having these camps go through, and we've been having really great results. Now, I will say in the last 3 months, we have seen an uptick of cases in the ages of 20 to 29. These are our college kids coming home, not following the rules. I'm assuming, I'm not out there chasing them down. But we saw that tick go up. That's where my department is going to be assisting almost hand to hand, holding the school nurses' hands as we walk through each time something happens. But sorry, I forgot where I was going with that. But we have developed these relationships with the school nurses. We've provided lots of information and lots of guidance to make sure that you are implementing things to be successful. We did recently have, I know where I was going, sorry. So Our camps did really well. Now on sports, it was a little different for me. I have 3 towns. So I have a lot more people doing different types of sports, a lot more private. I did have an outbreak. I had a child in a camp, in sports camp, who did test positive. Being that we know what to do, it was very clear to me I needed to do those 25 people that were in their cohorts. That's why cohorts are so important, to keep them small, because those 25 people then had to be quarantined. Also, the person also played on another league, which gets, you know, let's face it, a lot of these kids that do that. And we did spread, the disease did spread. So that is why there's been some hesitation with the sports. I'm going to be honest with you. I know CIC, I'm sorry, Steve, I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't here for your presentation. But I know that the Department of Public Health had issued the letter on the 13th with their guidance after CAIC had presented theirs. So right now, we're waiting for them to come into agreement as to what they're supporting to happen. And I would imagine that's coming out in the next day or two. And I know that each of my 3 towns have taken a pause. We need to wait and see what's going on. Yes, our numbers are low, but the goal of our numbers keeping low is to get these kids back into school. That's been our ultimate goal, is to get these kids back into school, and hopefully then functioning and keeping these numbers low until we can get a vaccine. And I'm very hopeful that through my conversations with CDC and DPH, that we're going to be doing vaccine, our critical workforces, hopefully by end of this year. So just wanted to give you a little background.
Maura, again, thank you so much for that. Just again, on behalf of the board, administration, and team, thank you for joining us tonight. We all know Chesapeake's playing a huge role in all this, and we understand that you're certainly, you know, you're not Dr. Fauci, but you're definitely, you know, a soothing voice in our town. And I know Maura a little bit just from the food service business, has a great reputation there, and as well as this. So thank you for being here and giving us that. It helps a lot. Steve, I thank you for the details and presentation. I have a quick question. I'll check the chats before I run, but I'll get back to Adam and Tim in a second. So, you know, Maura touched upon one thing, which is, you know, I can imagine, Steve, for you and Jeff and team, and, you know, the disconnect between the CIAC and the Department of Public Health we saw in the last couple of weeks, you know, with one coming out one guidance, and, you know, not really being on the same page, is throwing a wrench into a lot of school districts' plans. You know, we're all in a wait and see mode. I know some other school districts have postponed sports, some have canceled. They seem to make individual decisions. But it sounds like, in listening to your presentation, that if the CIC gives the go ahead, then we're ready to go. And I guess my question is for, you know, for Jeff, really, and Steve, is, you know, should the CIC come out with guidance that it's okay to start fall sports, and by some miracle the Department of Public Health agrees with that, are we good? Are you guys gonna be supporting the decision to move us forward? What, you know, where's, you know, I haven't heard from our leadership team yet on this, what their thoughts are. I know they're also dealing with constant changes in direction.
Would I support the sports moving forward if CIAC did?
Yeah.
I would want to work through Maura and our local health professionals rather than just take CIAC guide on it. I think it would have to be a collaborative decision at the local level after the state says, after the governing body says it's appropriate or not,
right,
for the fall season. No,
I assume as much, and I don't want folks to get the impression that you know, that's the case. But it's glad to hear. I mean, we're all in that mode. We're not alone. Is there been any thoughts given? I know one of the things that the Department of Health put out there, probably was last week, was, you know, postpone or wait till the spring. Is there any advantage to us for waiting for spring to do fall sports at this point, or is that pretty much going to depend on the situation as it evolves? I don't.
So Tony, the whole, Jeff, excuse me, if you don't mind me.
Go ahead, please take that.
a lot of that is based upon the fact that we know the vaccines are coming. And we are very hopeful that in New Haven County, I have to vaccinate 11,000 first critical workforce. That is in phase 1. When phase 2 comes out, that is the general public. Now, they haven't given us details of how that's going to be implemented, but that is when your general public, your kids are going to be getting their vaccination. The vaccination is a 2-dose vaccine. And so it will be time, but they have been providing me information that they have several vaccines in works.
Yeah, no, I thank you, Maura, for that. I work in the drug specialty sector, as relates to data, and I know there's quite a few promising vaccine in the works, and we always talk about that. Until a vaccine has been tested and administered, and the time it takes to do that, it's going to be a prolonged situation. But so again, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. This is the first time as a board and administration had a chance to even talk about sports. So I know Steve said that CIC is discussing tonight. Maura, we'll see what the Department of Health comes back with in the next, hopefully, couple of days. But I appreciate the in-depth analysis, and I know the board has gotten many questions from sports parents and not sports parents. And I think a lot of the questions tonight we will have is really around the monitoring and enforcement of whatever we do, be in the classroom or on the field. And so one last question for you, Steve. I'm glad to hear that. I'm not surprised that the coaches are taking this seriously. I know they offer the best interest of our kids. I'm glad they're behind the protocols and procedures. But who's going to monitor what's happening during the practices and games? Like if I know the coaches are monitoring the players, but who's monitoring the coaches? Who's monitoring the gates to stop people from coming in that shouldn't be? I mean, how do we? That's the question I've been getting is, how do we keep eyes on this? And this even goes into the classroom, which we'll talk about later. But the monitoring aspect of it, how are you going to, keep tabs on whether people are following guidelines or not?
Great question, Tony. I'll be busy. There's no question about it. A lot of this responsibility is on me. And of course, that's one of our concerns with spectators, that it's easy to say no spectators. Therefore, we're not monitoring who's coming in. We know that you have your sport junkies that you're not going to be able to keep them away. They'll be hiding in the bushes. Those are things that as a league, we are constantly meeting and discussing of what are the best options for that. Not every school has the ability to close off their facility. People can walk through our woods, as you know, to get to our fields. So those are obstacles I think that we're going to have to address as we get closer and closer, if in fact we do have a season.
Got it. Thank you, Steve. Adam, you had many questions. I know Tim has a question, but we're still on a sports aspect. So for those watching,
I'll try and limit my initial volley of questions and they're all to Maura, obviously. So today, the governor at his 4:00 briefing gave what I thought was a fairly shocking statistic. It seemed like 3 weeks ago, or during the height of when Florida and Texas were going crazy, that the turnaround time to get a test in Connecticut was 14 days. Today, the governor said that, if I have it right here, that the average is now 2 days, and that 75% is around 1 day turnaround for a test. If that is true, should all of our students and teachers be tested? Do we have that capacity to set a baseline before school begins?
Okay, so I can answer that because I myself was tested during that time. And yes, it took me 10 days. And that was basically because all of the labs were directed to prioritize the hot states. Okay, my son was tested the day before last, right here in Cheshire, to go back to school, and he got it back within 2 days. So in that respect, I think that things have kind of calmed down a little bit, and we're slowly getting labs to start, because honestly, there was a hiatus when that happened in the state, that the health directors were going crazy, that we cannot do correct contact tracing and stop the spread when we have such a long delay. So we did have a very large, loud voice to get that back. So I'm very happy to say that we are back where we should be. Now, as far as testing everybody goes, I will tell you that there is not enough reagents out there. We are still low. I sorry, but it is the way it is. So we've been yelling that there's not enough testing since March. We need more. We need more fast. But the problem of it is that there's things coming out with all the different testing medias. So the most accurate ones that they really want us to do is the where you go to the actually like the drive-in and you're getting a nasal swab. The rapid tests are right now what the CDC has changed, that if you get a rapid test and it's negative, that's a presumable. So you need to then go get another PV, sorry, I'm forgetting the names, go through the regular drive-through and get a nasal swab. So as much as we've been pushing a lot more for the rapids, they're still not accurate. And we still don't have enough testing medium. So that is what is happening.
I just want to add one little thing, Adam, to this. So for what it's worth, Maura, you might appreciate this. So my daughter's going to Fairfield University. All the students before they moved in had to take a mail-in saliva-based test. They all did. In fact, she took hers sent in Thursday, got the results Monday, came out great. Tuesday, Fairfield notified all parents to disregard that lab's test results. They lost faith in them, and that during the move-in day specifically, all students going to get the nasal test would result within 15 minutes. So it's kind of goes to show you that, you know, it's still evolving. But yeah, I don't envy the testing scenario.
Now, we all know the testing scenario has not been perfected. And we're doing the best we can. And the still main thing that they really want people to do is that if you have symptoms, please get tested.
Got it. We'll get into a little bit of that later. More,
Okay.
Thank you. Adam, back to you.
And so my second question is, so since we won't be able to set a baseline, and I know there's been a lot of chatter, you know, I guess it's my job to read Facebook, as it is Tony and all the rest of us, to get the pulse on the community. And all of the you know, you see on the news, all the recent studies are saying that now the kids who are below the age of 10 or through the age of 18 or whatever can carry a larger viral load than even an adult can, and but they're not sure if they can spread it or not. And I'm just wondering if the studies, if you're aware, I'm sure you're aware of all the same literature, and you probably have access to much better stuff than I do. Are those cases where the children were wearing masks as like our students are going to be?
I will tell you, Adam, unfortunately, I don't know that specific study. I've just had so much that I have to rely sometimes on my experts at DPH, and they haven't really updated us on that. Remember, this is a novel disease. This is very new, and the studies are happening now. We learned a lot from H1N1, and a lot of the lessons and the recommendations are coming from that time, but it is still new, and we don't know a lot. So I can look it up for you and get back to you, but I just don't know that specific study.
Okay, yeah, I was just more concerned that, you know, because just wondering what the context is, because if all the kids are supposed to be wearing masks and it's supposed to, you know, decrease the spread by 90% or whatever, you know, all these other demonstrations are showing, then I'm just wondering if we're in a better position than we think we are. That's all I'm wondering there. I have one more question, but I'll wait. I'll let others go and I'll come back.
Tim had a question, and I'll ask any other board members.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, so I just want to say, to be clear on this, is that I'm skeptical about sports moving, contact activities moving forward at this time. With regard to the CIAC, I appreciate what Jeff said. They have their own priorities, and they're not necessarily the priorities of the Cheshire Public Schools. They may be aligned or they may not be. So my question for you, Steve, is when do you expect contact activities or close proximity activities would start? And I say this simply because, so my question really relates to, we're back to school on September 11th. And it seems to me that, we want to stagger these things and see where we are. This is kind of what I was hearing from Maura. If we had some time to know where we are, whether that's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, make a decision somewhere into the future. Do we have a flare up as soon as we get back? Because, somebody's older brother was off to college and now they're back because school got closed there in that state or whatever it is. So when would you expect contact activity to start? Or has it already? I mean,
I think, Tim, that's what's being decided tonight. I know that the Department of Public Health is looking to start sports 2 weeks after school begins to let schools open up. And so what is that date? Because there are schools starting on all different dates. When sports, if they do start up, there's a 3-week cohort period where we're slowly going to increase the time that cohorts are meeting and also increase the amount of kids within that cohort. So what we'll start doing is start combining cohorts as we go along. So you're slowly bringing the team together and creating a new cohort. And of course, the goal at the end is to eventually play a contest. So it's probably, once you start, if and when sports start, it's probably 3 to 4 weeks out from when that actually begins. And in that period of time, we're able to really monitor what's going on. If we start to have setbacks, as Maura mentioned, if we start to see some flare-ups, it's going to just back down or shut down. So the goal here isn't to win championships. And I've talked to kids about that. The goal is to give them an experience in their athletic choice that they really like. If we can't do it safely, we won't do it.
okay, so you're saying that games or meets, whatever it might be, that they would start 3 to 4 weeks after the 11th, or the activity or the contact activity would start 3 to 4 weeks afterward.
3 to 4 weeks, actually 3 weeks after the start of when the CIAC and the Department of Public Health say we can start, if in fact we could. Right.
Okay.
So that would be your first scrimmage. That would be your first contest, et cetera, as a team.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other questions from board members on sports? Steve, you're certainly welcome to stay. And again, I want to thank you for coming this evening, putting the presentation together, bearing with us on all these questions. We certainly support you and our administration and our educators and getting a safe school opening, whether it's reopening schools or sports, after school activities. We're just trying to be very thorough because we do get a lot of questions and we're trying to funnel these into the folks. And I hope folks that are watching, if you're just tuning into the meeting, we're almost an hour into it. We just covered sports as it relates to school opening, and Steve took us through a great presentation of all the protocols and procedures. I'm not going to recap everything said, but Jeff, I did get asked already if it's possible for the meeting to have any presentations available for the public. I know Steve mentioned that a lot of materials up on the CPS sports website, and we'll make that information available in case folks want to revisit that. Steve, thank you. Jeff, how do you see this going forward? I don't know if Maura has a presentation to give. Do you want to talk about school reopening?
Yeah. Maura wanted to share just a few items, and then I know you and the public had some questions for her, so we'll facilitate that, and then we can move on.
I assume your voice is well rested right now. For now.
Mine? Yeah, it's nice to take the break.
Anyway, Maura, it's all yours when you're ready.
So really, I thought that was my 5 minutes,
Yeah.
what I gave originally. So I already gave my presentation. I will be honest with you. I'm more here to answer your questions. If I wanted to start talking about COVID and our experience, we would be here for days.
No, we're cognizant of that, Maura. It's we're trying to funnel a lot of, and you're getting these same. I'm sure you're getting the same questions too. I'll start off with one since you asked. I know as a parent of my daughter's going to junior year at the high school, and my senior daughter's graduated, and I still very much invested in Cheshire Public Schools. My daughter's going in, and did get the email from Cheshire High School that we're going to be able to pick up thermometers to be able to take temperatures home. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, why are we not checking temperatures at school when kids arrive? And I know there's some back and forth in that. Is there a reason why it's not worthy to check temperatures at school when kids walk in, or
Well,
what's your
I'm going to give you a little background in the fact that when this first started, we were really using thermometers and basing people's temperatures as the main issue, because at that time that was the top illness symptom. It isn't anymore, especially amongst kids, it's not. So that is why we got the thermometers and we distributed them to the schools. And the Department of Public Health had really recommended, looking at the data, that we really didn't need to base it on that symptom, that temperature, because the kids' symptoms were different. So that's really why the temperatures were taken off. Now, we're still doing that in different places. It gives people a sense of security, but it's not really an accurate, especially, is your thermometer been calibrated? Is it there's a lot of variables in this. So we are just really emphasizing that the parents really should be knowing. The one thing we really want to emphasize is that if your child is not feeling well, your child should not be going to school. That's really the message, and a strong message that we need to be sending to the parents. So we're going to give you that thermometer, but for you to check your child. But also we want to make sure that the parents really understand their children's symptoms. And we want to make sure that when they come in, and if they get a tummy ache or if they're not feeling well, there's still other viruses going around everyone. It's all, we didn't just only be exposed to COVID viruses. We still have other viruses around with mimicking symptoms. And we're going to be in flu season right around the corner with the same exact symptoms. So it's really getting to know your child and knowing when to keep your child home.
Thanks, Maura. Before I go on, Andrew, you had a question.
Maura, how many confirmed cases do we have in Cheshire now? Is it higher now than it was in the beginning of the outbreak, or is it
I can tell you that in the last 3 months, I'm sorry, I don't have the exact data with me, but in the last 3 months, we've had over 99 cases. I wanted to see the trends. And if you want to go onto Chespercott's Facebook page or webpage, you can see that the trends have clearly been steadying down since our peaks were in April. But we've been a pretty steady 5 to 10 new cases a week.
So even as businesses have reopened, sports and camps have gone on, the cases have gone down?
They've stayed steady. If you go look since May through now, we have been pretty much staying low. We are following the rest of the state.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Any other board members with questions for Maura so far? Faith.
So Maura, just some historical, just to help me put this in perspective. What is the most common form of transmission? Is it just public to public, family to family? What's going on? Can you tell?
Well, I can tell you that we've had over 400 cases, and I can tell you we interview every single.
Wait, can I just stop you? That's 400 for all 3 towns, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Can we deal with just Cheshire specific?
That's really hard for me to say, because just listen to me for 1 minute. If I can just start from there, because I will say that about 90% of those cases had some connection to medical people.
Mm-hmm.
So regardless if it's Cheshire, Wolcott, or Prospect, majority of them, when you start digging down as to where they came in contact with someone, that they have some connection to some medical person. Now, not all of them, but I would say that I only have about maybe 5% that have no clue who they were exposed to
Okay.
or where they got it.
All right. And so, so it seems to be a medical transmission. We were in school for 10 weeks before we finally shut down. And you're saying too that in December, they were actually seeing cases. And that's what I'm reading too, is they think it was there probably late December, beginning of January. So we went almost 10 plus weeks. Can you trace any of those in 80, in Cheshire, we had 83 cases. Is there any way to trace any of those back to a school related, a CPS related infection, either through students or teachers?
There's no way, because you don't know who your cases are.
Okay. I just am trying to allay folks'
Our
concern.
first cases didn't occur until March 25th.
And schools were already down 2 weeks by then, right?
Yeah, so I don't know. We were not prioritizing at that time on children. We were seeing it big time in the elderly and the nursing homes.
And mostly nursing homes that did not have the equipment, the PPE to stop the infection.
Well, we had we were in a very dire situation where we did not have enough PPE, not in there, not in the hospitals. It was all over.
Okay. And then do we have a number at which point we will close our schools down? Is it 1 case? Is it 5 cases, 10? I mean, I read what the governor has sent in terms of guidelines. What does that translate to for Cheshire?
We don't have that data, or they have not provided us that guidance at this point. So I don't know that answer yet.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, let me piggyback on that. Mark, I'm glad you answered that, and Faith, you brought that up, because the State Department of Education did publish an addendum. I don't know if it was number 4 or number 7, but it talked about, and Jeff knows more than I do on this, but talked about how to handle situations when there is a case or someone's showing a symptom in a class, but they haven't released anything yet on beyond 1. And so again, for folks watching, I know that's probably in the top 3 questions we get is, at which point, does the school decide to close down? Is it the entire class? Is it, we don't have that guideline yet.
No, but that is why the importance of these cohorts. You want to keep these small cohorts and make sure that everybody is following the public health mitigation strategies, washing their hands, keeping 6 feet apart, wearing their masks. We know that if these mitigation strategies are implemented, the probability is lower that they will be at lower risk for contracting.
Great, thanks. Adam had a question.
Yeah, so that's kind of the buzzword, is cohorts. And so that unfortunately leads me to this question of, so it appears that in the elementary school and in the middle school schools, that cohorting of sounded like being between 20, 25, or whatever a class size is at the elementary school, and a class and the cohorts, I guess, if they've come up with at the middle school, where they're keeping passing and repassing down, especially at the elementary school, and I guess to a minimum at the middle school. So then that leads me to, even at a 50% occupancy at the high school, where there still will be hundreds of children in the halls passing at, what was it 3 or 4 periods a day? I forget exactly. With all those kids intermingling, because it's not like you're going to take one cohort and march them down the hallway to their next location or anything. How is that going to work, since we're stressing cohorting, and that does not seem to be possible at the high school?
Well, Mary, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I know Mary sent out communication to this evening to all the parents at Cheshire High School, detailed some of those numbers. I don't know if, Mary, if you want to talk a little bit about what that, and if put some color to it.
one of the reasons why one of the central reasons why we moved to a cohort. I'll get into my presentation, or move to a hybrid model. We have, 1,365 students, bringing 50% in, puts us roughly in the high 600s. So just to answer your question specifically, Adam, when we do have students passing with 50% of students in, I'd be moving half of the school population. So I'd be moving 341 students to their next class in an alphabetical rotation. That's why it was essential to have 4 class periods and a block schedule model, so that we would have time and could extend our passing time, so we could split those groups further as we move students through the hallway and have a chance of keeping them separate. Our hallways are 11 feet wide. So it really made the thought of all 1,300 plus kids, plus a couple hundred faculty, if they all need to move, extremely challenging and next to impossible to cohort. I don't know if you want me to get into more. I have
So in essence, then, Dr. Gadd, you are you are breaking up groups and moving them around, or at least staggering the timing, so that you can achieve some form of isolation as the population moves around the building. And so that would be my interpretation.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Well, I feel a little better about that, I guess. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Andrew, had a question?
Sure. I'm not sure who can answer this one. It's kind of a specific question that fellow middle school parents have asked me. Understanding that the Dodd teams will be cohorted by groups of 20 or so within where the teachers will rotate. Will those students also be cohorted based on their athletics, based on CIAC's decision tonight?
I can address that question. First of all, right now at the middle school level, all the schools that we play against have already gone to an intramural program. We have decided to postpone all activities at the school, after school activities, until October 1st. So at this point, we won't have any after school activities at Dodd that are going to be occurring in person, but just virtually for the time being.
Then after October?
We'll make a decision later in September. Once, we'll have a lot more information on the CIAC at that point. We'll have a lot more information how school opening is gone, what the data looks like, and I think we'll make a more educated decision toward the end of September rather than right now.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Andrew. Tim?
Thanks, Tony. So everyone here at the meeting, including people watching on YouTube, just so you know, I actually have a paid work meeting at 8:30, so I'm going to have to leave. I don't know if I'll be able to come back or not, but I will have to leave at least for a little while. Maura, a question for you. Generally speaking, based on what you know about the CPS plan right now, which is, again, generally elementary and Dodd, a full reopen, high school, a hybrid reopen, are you comfortable? Not necessarily thrilled with it, but are you comfortable with it that we should be moving forward with it?
You're on mute, Maura.
Oh yeah, you're on mute.
Sorry. There have been studies done from H1N1 that looked at when that was occurring, and they looked at cohorts and practicing public health mitigation strategies. And they showed in those studies that they were able to keep the incidence low. So as long as we are doing that and following the CDC guidance and doing the best that we can, which we are. I mean, those plans I went through and made sure that all those strategies, I've been meeting with everyone, talking to them, staying up to date with the nurses. I really feel comfortable going with the model that you guys have chosen, where 1 to 8 is going full time and the older kids, the high school kids, are doing hybrid. no one said this was going to be perfect. Nothing has been perfect through this pandemic. There is nothing normal about this time. But it is the best practice for this known from experience. I can't say it is foolproof. It's not perfect. Believe me, I'd rather not have it, but it is what it is. And I know that if we need to really emphasize to the parents and to the students the reasonings why we are doing this, and if they adhere to it, we should be okay. We did that. It's already been proven. Look at my salons. I haven't had any outbreaks in my salons. Look at my camp. I kept very close tabs with Holiday Hill. We did not have one camper. So, and if we practice this and practice it and practice it, practice makes perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maura. Actually, I'm going to skip ahead to Ann, and then I'll go back to Adam. So Ann, if you have a question, you're up.
Yeah, I do. And this question is probably for Jeff. So do we have plans that if an outbreak were to be identified in one school, does that necessarily mean that we would across CPS close things down, or would we deal with that one community first?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Ann. And in education and often in life, we like to be able to have a real clear black, white, if then sort of scenario. There's definitely comfort in that. Unfortunately, this is a situation that has wild ambiguity. So if, as Maura was suggesting, a student was participating in some out-of-state sports situation, Thursday through Sunday, and came back. It doesn't have to be sports. It could be anything, theater or whatever. They come back and they realize that they're sick, but they had been there with kids from various different buildings. That's going to be a much different scenario than if it was, I visited one person and I got sick here and I could pinpoint what happened. I was in a hospital or something. This is where Maura's team and our team and families in the community will have to work closely together to identify the circumstances and make good judgments about what has to happen next. And we're not going to take chances. Unfortunately, we had to adjust the high school graduation because there was too much ambiguity to feel comfortable moving forward. And to be ensure that we were safe. We knew there was a positive case, at least one, and perhaps others. So you have to be sensible about it, but we'll work together as a team to figure that out.
Thank you, Jeff. I wrote down that quote, wild ambiguities.
Yeah.
I'm going to skip Adam again. Catherine.
Sorry, Adam. I just had a question for Maura. I think that there are some concerns or questions about the plan as it relates to the adult staff in the schools, teachers and other adults in the buildings. And, from my understanding of the plan, I think that we've sort of we've paid attention to that as well. It's not just safety of the students, but I didn't know if you had looked at the plan sort of from that perspective as well, and sort of, make sure that we're doing the stuff we have to do from that point as well.
Yeah. When I'm looking at any of these plans, I am looking at everyone. It's from the janitor all the way to the top. Because this disease is not pick, it doesn't pick a certain person. So yes, I look at, everything from how everyone's coming in the building to how everything is being cleaned, we've gone through all of that and making sure that I understand these teachers, some of them are extremely nervous, and rightfully so. That is how everybody is about opening up. The salon owners were nervous, the food service were nervous, the Holiday Hill staff was nervous, and it isn't just a Cheshire thing. That was throughout the whole state. everybody was nervous about opening up. And I think that you're going to find that once you're getting in and you're going to see all the things that Cheshire school system is done and going to be doing to protect them, I think they will be surprised. And it's a fearful event. They've been home, they've been protected, and they're watching the news. Sometimes the news can put a little fear in everyone, but we're on low rates, and we want to keep it that way. And so that is why they are doing mitigation strategies, the sanitizers, increasing washing your hands, taking the time. We've had many discussions about the time that these steps that they're doing are taking out of the day, but it's to keep everybody safe, not just the students, the staff, the administrators, everybody top to bottom.
Thank you.
Thank you. Adam.
Thank you, Tony. Well, my questions turned into more of a statement because both Ann and Catherine kind of have covered the topics that I wanted to ask about. So I'll just say that I think that for everyone who's watching, I think they're really happy to hear that you and your department feel good about the plan that Jeff and team has put together as far as the reopening for each level of our school system. And I'm also happy to hear that you, and at least I won't say, I don't know if endorse may be a strong word, but at least are agreeable to having the hybrid plan at the high school. I know that the governor, at least even today, was still hesitant about the hybrid plan because he made comments during his 4 o'clock when he spoke to the I want to call him Superintendent Cardona or Commissioner Cardona, where Cardona was endorsing hybrid, and the governor wasn't so happy about it. So I'm hoping that the governor isn't going to put a kibosh on this plan, because I think the plan that all of you have put together is, I think, as cutting edge as can be, given the resources that we have, and I hope this goes a long way to really tamping down a lot of disinformation that's been out there about what we are doing, what we aren't doing. And, even to say as board members, there's been a lot of accusations about us. And, some of us are going to be, have the rubber meet the road. Our children are going to be going into those schools, and we're going to be subject to these policies that you're all going to be putting into effect. And so we're praying to God every night too, that this all works out, and that that these well-laid plans work to their best of the ability. So I thank you for all the hard work that you've done, and that the Jeff and team have done in putting this together.
Thank you.
First of all, I just want to say, by no means is anybody on the board putting more on the spot to bless the plans set forth that the board is moving forward. But it is reassuring, and I'm not surprised. I know Chester Scott's been very involved in a number of aspects of community on this. So, and just I'll turn over to Catherine. She had another question, but now I lost my train of thought. It's not just so folks aware. So, monitoring enforcement, and I don't know if we need more for this part, or I don't know if Jeff has more to present on reopening. Just some questions around the reopening in general, hybrid and things like that. But really the question that it's probably the number one I've seen lately is, Tony, Board of Ed, school district, full well kids are going to be there all day long pulling up their masks. And I got full transparency. I sat in on a negotiation meeting. I had my mask on. A half hour into it, I'm already doing this with it. And I think it was Jeff that slapped me aside the head, said, "Don't do that." And I'm a full grown adult, although my wife will argue sometimes about that. But with the little kids, the teachers are going to be the front line in the classroom. And, so they had a responsibility. But the monitoring enforcement, I guess, is what parents come down to is, the questions we get is, Tony, it's going to happen. Teacher can't do a damn thing about it. what happens in that case? And that goes back to Jeff's, flow chart, right? People want to see a flow chart. If, when, else, do this. So I hope a little later tonight we hear a little bit more about, what parents and students, even teachers can expect around enforcement, that the mask are being worn, someone doesn't wear it, what happens? If teacher has a legitimate concern, who do they go to? How does it get resolved? I think that's more in the minutia of the detail, but that's certainly not Chestercott's area. It's going to be more in the internal mechanics of the school system. So it is a team effort. That was my point. So I'll end there. Catherine, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bypass you. You're up.
No problem, no problem. So I just have one question, because I think some people are confused about the fact that, the K-8 students will be going to school in person pretty much every day. And the high school, we're doing the hybrid model, which I think is probably one of the few ways we can try to, control things as much as possible at the high school. But just to ask the question, would you have a lot of confidence in our ability to keep the infection rate low if, in fact, the high school all the kids went back every day, all day long? I mean, do you have a sense of whether that is even something that could be managed very well or at all?
Are you asking me?
Well,
Or-
I'm kind of asking, yeah, I mean,
Because
just based
I
on the
would
fact that we couldn't really
Yeah.
cohort even a little bit,
Honestly, I think that the hybrid model at that age group is a much better, more manageable.
Mhm.
If we were going full time, we had this discussion, and they knew that when they first gave out the planning documents, that it was almost going to be impossible to do cohorting with going full time. You need to get smaller groups to be able to control and manage, because again, it goes back to the mitigation strategies. If you have kids going everywhere, you're not going to be able to manage them. So manage them, that's Dr. Gadd's area of expertise of how she's going to do that. So I'll turn to her for how she's going to do that. But my suggestions, again, it's easier the smaller they are, because you can control them better. You're watching them, and if something happens, you only have that small group. You don't have the large masses. And if you have the large masses, that's when a huge outbreak can occur. And that's what our goal is, not to have that.
Right. I think it was I just thought it might be helpful for people to hear from you, as the public health expert, sort of what the possibilities might be. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions specific to Maura from the board or anyone else?
Yeah, there are a variety of questions that were
Okay.
submitted. I would just want to try and roll through those if we could. Let me just pull those up.
Yes, please. Excuse me for 30 seconds. I'm going to run to the.
Sure.
I'll be right back.
A question from Rob Ricardo. Do we know when tested, is it COVID-19 or other coronavirus? Are we 100% sure what strain it is?
Yes.
Okay.
We know what they're doing there. It's the DNA. So yes, that has already been.
The next question is from a parent, Ritu Dar. How transparent will school districts be in communicating about any infections in school? I would like to know about any cases, even if my child is learning remotely, and I can decide on what numbers, whether to go in or not in the future. So basically, the reason I read this is even though I think that's kind of a school question, but we work in such concert with Chestercott through that process. In the case of contact tracing, Maura's office would be contacting individuals. In the case of just notification to the community, we would notify of a positive, the people in that school of a positive case. A question from parent/teacher Taryn DeSorbo. the use of plexiglass dividers, particularly in cafeteria, due to the fact students will not be wearing masks. Is that a possibility for inside spaces when masks will not be worn? I can talk about the lunch piece a little bit, but Maura, do you want to talk about the value of perceived value of masks, or the shields?
Yeah, we actually were looking at the shields. Yes, shields have a value. Any kind of barrier has a value to prevent those droplets from coming to the next person so that they are inhaled, and that is how you get the virus. We did speak to our medical director, because we were investigating into that, who did not feel that they were as protective. The masks are a tight fitting mask, that goes over your face, and it goes over your nose, over your mouth, because it's going to be collecting those particles, versus a shield, your particles are still out there. And whether or not, then you have to worry about the cleanliness of the shield, because although it isn't a high rate of spread through that, it is a known spread that you can spread it from your hands, touching that and then touching your face.
The other thing I would add around the lunches, and just to build off of that, Maura's comment there, in the conversation with our medical advisor, who meets with epidemiologists from Yale on a weekly basis for updates, really the thought was, unless that shield goes floor to ceiling and basically encapsulates the individual, there's really limited value to that. What we've done in terms of lunches is Mr. Massiana and I did a whirlwind tour of our schools, and in the places where it's really hard to maintain more social distancing. At the high school, where we have CAF Commons, East Gym, Senior Courtyard, where there's more space to spread out, it's not as much of an issue. But in our K-8 buildings, we've secured tents, which was really hard to find tents. And when I say tents, I'm talking about massive commercial tents. The one at Dodd is 60 by 120, for example. So we can move a lot of people outside with great social distancing during dining. So that's really our effort there to maintain the distancing. Another question from David Cadogan, who's a teacher. My question is primarily for Ms. Esposito. Can you summarize, this is a multi-part, Can you summarize the risk assessment and modeling data that evaluated the CPS plan to reopen? What's the probability of spreading COVID-19 through people in our schools under the current plan? Also, can you quantitatively describe the effectiveness of masks in schools? The Chu et al. Lancet paper suggests that masks, mostly N95 and surgical, might lower the chance of infection about 5-fold in medical settings, while we seem to be operating under the assumption that masks reduce the risk of infection to 0.
So I'll try to answer this one. There is no, when we look at the plan, my role as the public health director is knowing that through lessons learned, like I've said before, through H1N1 and other studies, that we know that public health mitigation strategies, and I don't have my notebook here, have worked in the past. Again, I want to reiterate that they have worked in the past. They've slowed the spread, and that's what we need to do. So when I looked at the plan, that's what I was looking for. Were they taking every little bit and examining it, pulling the layers apart? Is there a different solution for something? Can we do this? Can we do that? Can you, so that was my role in helping the school system look at that plan. So there was no probability model. It was just simple public health methodology. And really, honestly, it was from, Chespercott's been in the trenches. We have been fighting this with all the different places. And I've learned a lot when we're doing the restaurants, when we're doing the businesses, when we were opening all those things. I was out there visiting the sites. I visited almost many of the public buildings in town and walked through each one to say, you know what, that would work, that wouldn't work. Just knowing, I don't know how to tell you my little spidey senses. It's just what my public health knowledge is. Yes, N95s are probably one of the best ways. It's not 100% effective. You have to be fit tested, but unfortunately, those N95s are only earmarked for the hospitals. There are devices that are more effective, but they're very expensive and good luck getting them. Studies are going on right now talking about different masks. And that I don't want to get into the whole mask thing because there's lots out there. But there's some good studies but the whole big logic behind a mask is if it is fitting tight and it needs to go above the nose and around your mouth and be tight, then it should be okay because it's gathering, it's about catching the particles and holding the particles. So I agree with you. You're not going to be, they are not 100%. There is nothing 100%. So.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that, like we said, masks are one mitigating factor.
Mm-hmm.
Space is another mitigating factor.
Mm-hmm.
Air circulation is another mitigating factor. The question arises about air circulation. I know I've received questions about HEPA filters in classrooms. The Department of Public Health doesn't recommend them. I did contact many other surrounding districts. Of 13 that responded back to me, none of them are using them. So I'm thinking that it's probably because they're not very effective. Our health provider says they're not very effective. Any suggestions for, what might be possible for air circulation? I know that they've just said, fans on low perhaps can be used to circulate air away from individuals in the room, but I wanted your take on all that.
Wow, now I have to be a plumber. Okay, so
HVAC, everything else.
Let me get my husband in here. So, plumbing and airflow is not my expertise, and I understand, that I would definitely have one of your, have a consultant come through. I don't know what you have done so far, but yes, they've talked about increasing your ventilation. And I know that was questions we put out to Vinny and the schools, can you increase that airflow? Because that was one of the questions. But I believe the school is looking at this, especially the safest place to be during most of this is outside. So I understand that a lot of your plans rely on taking the kids outside a lot, which is another mitigation strategy. Other than, increasing it and getting it done by a professional, I would look to your facilities.
Yeah, and obviously our facilities is something that we as a school system and community are working toward and recognize that, they need to be improved not only for, air circulation, but for a myriad of other reasons. But, just to move on to some additional questions. Mask wearing. It's just a question about whether or not schools should be open full time. I think you've already addressed that in our plan. The variable of 3 feet versus 6 feet of social distancing at the elementary grades. I don't know if you could speak to that issue.
So originally, when I went back to when this was all happening, we were re-looking back at the mitigation strategies. And even in the older mitigation strategies, they had talked about 3 feet. During that got changed by CDC, they went up to 6 feet. When the Pediatric Association took a look at all of this and they gave the schools and public health some guidance, they had recommended at the lower level that they could go down to 3 feet. It wasn't, it was a guidance tool to help you, assist you in the worst case scenario. If you can get 6 feet, that's what we want you to get. But this was guidance based upon every school in Connecticut, and some of them just can't do that. So it was going to help you guide. So that was what the pediatricians had recommended.
And obviously, we've talked about in meetings previously, there are only 2 ways to get much more space in a room, and that's either to have less students or bigger rooms. And so when we look at all of the test data, all the infection rates, balance that against the benefits of students being in school, other mitigation strategies, we've employed this strategy to have our students in K-8 in school with tents outside to create additional space in that way, because we can't build permanent buildings now that are larger. Additionally, the other piece of that is, Ben is going to talk about in his finance report that we've hired moving companies and taken all extra furniture out of classrooms that wasn't necessary and shipped that off to a storage facility to kind of make the room bigger, even though we can't make the room bigger. So there is additional space in rooms now for social distancing.
But Jeff, it is part of the state Department of Education guidance that 6 foot where possible. But
right. Yeah. Maximize the greatest extent we can.
that would not be in violation of their guidelines or.
No.
Thank you.
No. And that's why I think it's also important that for families who don't feel comfortable with that there is the remote learning option that's also available. And, it may not be their preferred. Maybe they want their child to be there with 6 feet distancing, but we just don't have the facility space to be able to do that.
Got it. Just a check in. It's about 8:40. I don't know how many more questions you have.
That covers the highlights
and so forth. But
that covers the highlights for Maura. No
awesome.
doubt.
Okay. None from the board at this time. Moving forward, Jeff, you want to give is there any update on the school reopening survey that went out there, or do we ready to present any of that data yet?
Yeah. I was going to talk about that a little bit in the superintendent's report. We're all into COVID. If we want to there are 2 other items I would bang out that are COVID related. One is the report or the survey. And then I asked Dr. Gadd if she could give a quick overview on the high school plan, because that went out more recently. And I know there were a lot of parent questions about that, and this would answer those questions.
Yeah. And Maura, first of all, on behalf of the board, I'll say thank you so much for coming here tonight. Thank your team and Chesapeake for all you're doing. I know you're a partner with us, and we appreciate the guidance. I know the public does as well. You're certainly welcome to stay. I sneak out, but if you're,
I will.
I'm going to give Maura one more shout out though, because people don't realize that not only is she doing all the typical COVID stuff, but one of the issues of concern for us as an employer is childcare for our staff, that their children now are in these remote and hybrid and whatever the case may be situations, or and they're trying to figure things out too. And Maura's team has been helping me work through that process with the YMCA. So that's greatly appreciated.
Yeah. Can I just give you guys just a little heads up on what's going to happen with the nurses?
Yeah.
Do you have a minute? I just want you to know that part of our surveillance, we've always worked with your nurses to surveil them, to oversee what your illnesses are. And so we've been working very hard. We've actually created an online easy system so your nurses can go into Chestercott's website, plug in the numbers, and easily send it. We have also provided to the nurses all the contact tracing questions so that they can start those questions because they know those kids. But we are going to be coming in with a team and really digging down into the layers with your nurse. And your nurses, we are going to be working, and they are going to get to know us very, very well. And they've been on the meetings with us. We're going to be doing Zoom meetings with them. We're going to be keeping those nurses really close, because we are in this together. And the first couple of times, that's a little, if there's a little, someone goes out with a little cold, your nurse might not be sure. Well, the Amendum 5, which I think you guys mentioned earlier, gave very clear guidance of what are the steps to happen. And so we will be walking each of your nurses through the first couple of them. And actually, every single time that they think that there's a positive, we are going to be right there with them. So they're not in this alone at all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So everybody, you have a wonderful night. Thank
too.
you for
Thank you,
having me.
Nora.
Okay,
you.
I'll see
Thank you,
everyone
Nora.
later.
Thank you.
Thank you. That wraps up section 2 of our presentation. We actually just covered some of the audience questions. I think actually all of them related to this. We're going to move on to the consent calendar. We're going to do just a little bit of Board of Ed business fairly quickly, sections 4 and 5, before we and some minute approval before we get into superintendent's reports. For those watching, just bear with us because during superintendent's report a little bit later, as Jeff indicated, is going to get more into the survey responses and we get a little bit more into reopening plan details. So that being said, we do have a consent calendar on the agenda. There are 3 items. The Board of Ed does have this in our packet, which is on our Google Drive. Jeff, do you want to walk us through the items first?
Sure.
In case the board has any questions on it. I know we don't normally go into detail, but we do have some new board members, and I'm cognizant of that. These are items that we usually affirm or consent to the beginning of the school year. So it might be worth just a couple minutes to walk through a little more detail, Jeff. Thank you.
Sure. The first item is our the board has to approve a class size policy every year. Basically, our policy has remained the same since 1987, that the board shall endeavor to maintain class sizes consistent with proven educational practices, which require that various learning situations may alter the number of students per class. The board, through its committee, shall make any recommendation concerning personnel and space requirements based on all factors regarding class size. So that's an annual, like I said, policy that gets renewed. ACE's membership agreement, where the local regional education service center, or RESC for Cheshire, is ACES. That's basically New Haven County Area Cooperative Educational Services. We work with them on a number of collaborative efforts in the area, and the membership there is $250, and we're part of that process that we approve annually. Additionally, for the upcoming school year, we appoint a hearing officer to serve in place of the board. They hear cases of expulsion or residency issues, which could still be appealed, but the hearing officer hears them initially. So that's a pretty, again, 3 standard motions that we make every year.
Excellent. Any questions from the board on the consent calendar? Adam. Sorry, I didn't see you earlier. Did you have a question? Or is Adam frozen?
No, I'm not frozen. My question was about something else, and I'll save it for when we get back into reopening questions. So,
Thank you, sir.
So-
Barring there's other questions and comments, we do have a motion, and the motion is move that the Cheshire Board of Education approves the consent calendar as presented. Is there a second?
second.
Second,
Adam Grippo and the bevy of others second it. Any discussion? Seeing as there's none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. It is unanimous for the 6 of us present. Just to remind folks that Tim left a little earlier. Thank you. Next item is reports of standing committees. We'll start with finance. Mr. Grippo.
Thank you. I proudly hand the report over to Mr. Massiana.
Thank you, Mr. Grippo, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'll keep the finance report pretty brief. Normally, the first report of the year, we just close the books on July 31st, is usually very short. But this year, I just want to put out kind of some caveats, obviously related to COVID-19. The board members do have a report in their packet. The board's approved budget for the 2021 year is $74,593,926. As of the end of July, we've expended or encumbered about $12.6 million. So it's about 17% of the budget. However, we do not pass all the payroll encumbrances and the transportation account encumbrances, until we get to roughly mid-September. So it's not unusual that, we haven't encumbered those yet. It just takes time to process all those encumbrances. The caveat to this year's budget is obviously related to COVID-19. We just don't know, where our variances might be, and our variances are going to be essentially based on, are we staying in school for the full year? Will we wind up remote? So those are all going to have a factor or will factor into where our budget is. As a precaution, and I believe I explained this to the board members already, that normally when we start the new fiscal year, we have a 60% cap on non-payroll expenditures that are controlled at the school and department level. This year, the cap is 40%. So that will ensure that we have sufficient reserve if we have to reallocate our budget expenditures to other areas. What I will do, however, and it's in the initial report that we provided the board, is I will identify some of the potential costs due to COVID-19 that we either will or may incur. And I'll start with the largest potential expenditure, and that is, we've contracted with our cleaning company, Performance Environmental. They will be supplying 6.5 staff members to do cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting during the school day in all our buildings. If we do that and we're in school 180 days, then that cost would be $325,000 is the estimate. However, if we do wind up going in remote, it is a contracted vendor, so we wouldn't incur that cost, but that's a potential $325,000 variance that we would have to make up for in our budget. As Dr. Solon mentioned a few minutes ago, we were able to secure tent rentals and table rentals so that we can expand, not only our cafeteria areas, but our outdoor areas for mask break, potentially for student learning outside when the weather is good. So the tent rental estimate for 2 months, it would take us through November 2nd, is about $137,000. Dr. Solon mentioned also that we've gone to all our school buildings. We've identified any furniture and equipment that we do not need in the classroom this year because we're making compromises. So removing the furniture, which it will be completed this week, it started last week, storing that furniture and equipment for 10 months and then returning it at the end of the school year. That's about $120,000 again, if we keep the items in storage for 10 months. The cost of PPE and disinfecting wipes, and hand sanitizer and those types of things. We're assuming it's $15,000 a month. I don't have a really strong handle on whether that's enough or too much yet because we haven't started using any of these supplies, but that could be an additional $120,000. And then depending on how many staff members are on leave, we could potentially see our substitute costs, $100,000 over budget is my initial estimate. So if you took all those together, it's about $800,000. Hence the importance of keeping a 40% cap on non-payroll expenditures. And then the last thing I'll add for the board on the finance report for this first month is if instead of being in school for 10 months, if we wind up having to go into remote mode and we decided that the broadcast capabilities from our classrooms, to students who are home, so the teachers would be in building and broadcast to the students, the board members know that we've already agreed to outfit 56 classrooms. If we expanded that and added an additional 240 classrooms so that we would provide that capability in all our classrooms, that would be $768,000. Because it's about $3,200 per classroom. That assumes we could get all that done. There are some shortages of this type of equipment, and it takes time to install, these devices. So it's just to put a little context around where our budget might be, or where our expenditures might be, that we would have to make up those variances within our budget. So that's the finance report. Again, a little bit longer than we would normally have as of July 31st. So I'll pause there if there's questions or comments.
And I think Catherine has Anna has a question.
Oh,
I think I have, well, Adam, you go first.
no, Catherine, go ahead.
I don't even know where I am on the list. Okay. So we're talking about potentially, $1.5 million. Well, no, because the 768 would offset some of the 801 because we wouldn't be in school. However, let's say we're talking about $800,000 of unexpected, unanticipated costs. At what point, or have we already started to talk to the town council about the fact that we may need some assistance with that, unanticipated? I know I keep bringing this up, but I'd really like to know at what point do we try to get some sort of feedback from them on this kind of thing? Anyone?
Jeff, it looks like
Sure.
Jeff was ready to speak.
Yeah, we've had,
I'll give him first dibs.
Yeah, we've had conversations with Sean about, the reality that there is going to be substantial cost implications for providing a safe learning experience for our students and community. I think, where we are right now is that it's still a little bit premature to really say, this is going to be close to the number. So
Right.
we're holding off on that. I think, Vin is often giving me guidance about, when will we have a better sense? And he was just talking about, end of September. Then we, probably have a better sense of what a projection would be like. But there is an awareness on the town side of the street that, this is going to be a very unique budget situation.
Okay, thank you.
Vin, anything to add there? Or?
No, it's just at this point, there's so many unknowns about what might happen or could happen. And if we look at last year when we entered remote learning in March, a lot of the expenditures were dictated by executive order. And so we continued to pay staff and pay our bus contractor a certain fee. So I think all those will come into play. I will say this, at this point, I don't think, other than putting a cautionary flag of what might happen, I don't think there's any real action we can take. I would like to get certainly the first month of school under our belt and understand, what it might look like and how much PPE and other inventory we're going through so that we can better estimate where we'll be. Tents are only going to enable us to expand our square footage through November. There's really, once we hit November, it's going to be really too cold to extend those tents. Maybe we can get another, 15 days, out of those tents, but, that cost will stop, but it actually creates a bigger problem potentially if we're still, in school. And that would actually be good news because, if we're still in school, that means that the infection rate is low and that things are going well for us. So I hope that happens, and we'll deal with that problem a little later on.
Yeah, no, I wasn't really saying we should go to the town council with a hard number. I just, I don't want it, and I'm sure it wouldn't be a surprise, but I just want to make sure it wouldn't be a surprise. So that's all. Thanks.
Yeah.
I guess I just have a comment. Those are some pretty big numbers. And as far as remote learning goes, because I know that there are school systems that are proposing to go all remote who have a lot less resources than we do. And I'm assuming that some of those systems don't have the fancy new synchronous systems that we do. So if we had to go full remote, from a cost perspective, would we have to piece together a mostly asynchronous solution again, or would we be more, or would the teachers be more prepared to more, use the cameras that are inside of their laptops and try and share screens and create that more interactive experience that we were sort of getting to at the end of last year?
Yeah, I could
At a
certainly
very
answer the
more
question.
cheap solution.
Yeah, I could certainly answer that question, but I feel like it would pale in response in relative to Marlene's response. So I'll pass it off to her.
Hello, everyone. We have had a lot more time to get prepared, to plan professional development, to order devices, to trial lots of different tools, and for teachers to get more comfortable with the tools that we have available. So we do have a remote plan in place, and we would be ready to execute that at any point if we needed to. And our students now have devices and would be ready to go one-to-one from the start of school. So yes, we would be more prepared, we would be ready. And the fact that everyone has a device and we would have learning management systems ready to go down to the younger grade levels would mean that we could do more synchronous work. Again, I think the synchronous part of that is that direct instruction. We still would not want children of any age on their device from 8 to 3 every day, but we would be able to give them a good blend of direct instruction from the teacher, one-to-one conferencing, small groups, Google Meets, conferences, etc., in order to provide them with that direct instruction. There would still continue to be an asynchronous piece because there are things that they need to do on their own. There are things that they need to read, that they need to research, that they need to spend time struggling with, which would mirror more what happens in the classroom. Even in the classroom on a regular day in person, the teacher is not directly lecturing all the time. They are giving small pieces of work to kids. They are flipping the classroom, asking kids to watch things, showing things on the smart board. A lot of the work that would be done demonstrated on a smart board could then be put into a Google Classroom for students to watch. So in my mind, I think we're much better, much more prepared to do a healthier blend of both the synchronous and asynchronous.
Marlene, I can't say how pleased I am to hear that that you and the teachers are using all of your talents together to put, for lack of a better word, put together a much superior product for our students, so that the teachers can use their talents to teach the children, and the children can learn more effectively. But at saying that, I hope that we never have to use all of this work that you put together. But it's nice to know that it's there. Catherine, you had a question.
Yes, I did. So Marlene, when you talk that remote learning experience, is that for kids that are not going to be coming back into the buildings when school opens and will be doing remote learning? Is that the kind of experience they're going to have as well, or will it look? I'm just trying to understand
Yeah.
what that looks like as a
Right. That's a good question. And so it's as with everything since March, it's complicated. But again, I think we have those broadcast rooms will really, really help. Okay. Again, they're not broadcasting every moment of the day. They're broadcasting that instruction, and then they're available to the student as they are to the students in the room. It's going to be tricky in those places where we don't have broadcast equipment available. And it's going to be tricky. Think about, we're looking at each other right now. So there's how many of us on this call, and then picture how many others in your room, that whatever room you're in, right? Your living room, your dining room. So you need to attend to both the people in front of you on your screen and everyone else behind. So it's going to be really challenging for teachers to do both. But I think we don't want to leave anybody out, and we want to make sure people have options. And, yes, there will be a blend of both of those. Some may have more asynchronous work to do simply because unless I'm sort of carrying this around with me as I'm walking around the room, it would be tricky if you don't have that broadcast equipment. I guess it's going to be dependent upon the tools in the room, but still, in my opinion, better than what we were experiencing before. Because now you have a teacher who's not just teaching in a box. They're able to show you their smart board. They're able to have some conversation. So to be determined, but still much improved.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions? I
would just add to that curriculum response too. I was saying to John Rook today from the Herald that, it took us decades to reach a gold standard of instruction through a lot of trial and error, consultation with peers. This is our first foray into this hybrid sort of situation where you have students at home and you have students in front of you and you're trying to navigate that. Well, I think we are much better prepared. Every day we'll get a little bit better. And we aspire to do that anyway when we're not in these circumstances, but every day we'll get a little bit better. And, at this point, we're just eager to start teaching again.
And can I just jump back in there and say that I can't stress enough how important the communication is going to be for all these models, that when parents have a question, to contact the teacher. If parents have a question for the principals, to contact the principal. We are so willing and able and wanting to answer people's questions during this time and walk them through that. So whatever models we end up in as this year progresses, I would just ask that people make sure that before it becomes a problem, let us know, reach out.
I'm sorry, I just want to remind us that we are in a finance committee section of the report. And I know there's some more to come out. I don't want to stifle a great discussion. I think people tuning in, hey, wait a minute, I thought we were talking about finance. We'd like to stick to that, and we're going to jump right back into these details and shortly around reopening, just for point of order's sake. Thank you.
Faith, as a member of the finance committee, I'm assuming your question is finance related.
As if, Adam. No, actually, I was on a roll and I'm fine right now. You guys have covered the finance. I'll go. It was a procedural or a question related to instruction. So let's.
I'm sorry.
We'll move on. That's fine. Apology accepted. We'll move on, and it'll come up later.
Okay, so is there any other questions related to finance? All right, seeing none, I hand the meeting back over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Adam. And I think Vincent alluded to earlier, it's a little early to get into the medical best trust fund report and so forth. Hopefully, September's meeting, we'll have some more detail around that. Correct. So that being said, we've wrapped up the Finance Committee, School Modernization Committee update. So it's on the agenda for a couple of reasons. One is the committee did meet last night and met a few weeks, 2 weeks ago, first week of
August 3rd.
September. I don't know what month it is.
It was August 3rd.
So some work is being done. I'm going to ask Andrew and Ann to give an update on progress being made by Colliers and Malone McBroom. But I just wanted to let folks know one of the reasons why this is also on the agenda for tonight is there was some controversy on that committee. It is not resolved, but we're often asked, what is the board's role with the committee? What our thoughts are on that whole thing. So I'd like to get that toward the end. So because the board has not had a chance to talk about it, I certainly do not want to have an hour-long dissection of people. But I think folks kind of want to know where our heads are at with the committee. But let's just start with the actual work update. So Andrew and Ann, if you have some updates on the work, please share. I know you guys are both there last.
Sure, I could take August 3rd.
Yep.
I could take the August 3rd update. I was not at the August 19th meeting last night. My brother had a baby. Just became.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Last night was dedicated to helping them put together furniture as the baby was a month early and they were not prepared. So August 3rd meeting, it culminated about 9 months worth of work of the committee. We hadn't met since June 1st. Colliers has been doing a deep dive into all of the already prepared information that exists on the schools, including floor plans, renovations that have been done, projected to be done. A demographer has been hired, which is Malone McBroom, which is looking at population trends and building areas within the town to try to put together future planning needs for the school district. The month of October we'll be starting to see some of the products coming out of Colliers. Looking at they'll be walking through all the various schools with architects, engineers, and planners coming up with their best case scenarios for the plan. The idea is to have something out with a roadmap for the district by December, with an application hopefully to be submitted in June of 2021 with our first project. It's obviously very ambitious. There's a lot of work to be done, but that's pretty much what came out of the August 3rd meeting. I know we'll get into everything else that's happened on the committee, but I just, before Tony gets into that, I just want to say that we are working hard. There's a lot of dedicated people on that committee. There's a lot of work to be done, and we have a great group. So I'm hopeful that we could all work together to move things along. And hopefully those that are in the positions of power make the right decisions to help push the projects forward. So again, I wasn't at the meeting last night, so I don't know if Tony or Ann want to.
Yeah, I can briefly just jump in and say that last night Colliers gave us an update that didn't go much further than what you just said, Andrew. And Malone and McBroom were not present at that meeting, and it was reported that their demographic report is forthcoming. And I think at the next meeting, we will get a more in-depth look at all of that. We got a new member added to the committee. Her name is Kate O'Donnell, and she's replacing Anne-Marie Kemp, who resigned, a week ago now?
Yeah.
So there's progress on that front. And as Tony alluded to earlier, we still have some mending to do. And hopefully that's gonna start happening.
Thank you.
That's all I would add in terms of the progress. But I would reiterate what Andrew said. There are people working really hard. These are people who are volunteers from our community, and And I'm in awe of the work that they're putting in, and thank each and every one of them whenever I get the opportunity.
Thank you, Ann, for that. Andrew, just a quick update. Last night, the next meeting is going to be September 16th, I believe, for a couple of reasons. One is the committee wanted to know when the remaining vacancies going to be filled. Those Peter Talbot did officially resign recently. So Sylvia indicated that the town council, I think Don Walsh did too, that they want to try to get that filled as soon as possible. As Ann mentioned, Kate O'Donnell came on board, heard great things about her. So welcome to the fun, Ms. O'Donnell. We look forward to working with you. Great background there. And I think she was actually one of the folks originally interested in serving the committee. So I'm glad that people are still out there willing to work together. You know, as far as everything else, I'm going to, piggyback on what Ann said. We have very good people in the committee. There are no idiots. There are no ill will, well, for the most part. But I think, and I spoke with Ann earlier today on something, and she brought up a great point that we have not just people that were elected to various bodies, be it town council, board of ed, and that people, but just about half of that modernization committee is made up of public volunteers that are not politicians. They're not seeking office. They're truly good people that want to help the community in various ways. So, unfortunately, I hate to use the word politician. To me, it's a dirty word. Sorry. But we as politicians, because we're on the board elected, we say, oh, it's politics is part of our job. I don't like that, but it's not part of their job. So I know the situation bothers everybody on the team. I try and be careful what I say because I support the group. I absolutely support my female colleagues on the committee. I wish it was a different outcome. But, all our words, everybody in that group is being looked at under a microscope. Everything we say is being twisted in some ways. And, unfortunately, it doesn't help solve the problem. The group itself, it's fine. It's just the public out there. So by no means has anyone given up on anyone in that committee. We have not, none of us have given up on solving this problem. Just a quick little history on the committee, because I was asked even today, well, why isn't the Board of Ed doing something? The Board of Ed, this is not a Board of Education committee. Absolutely, it was a joint effort, and still is, with the town council. It is a town council committee. By charter, this was the only way that the two bodies can actually work together in some fashion in a charter manner. And so the town council formed it. There were 6 of us between the town council and Board of Ed, actually 8, because we had some turnover with the election, that helped select the existing group based on experience, et cetera. So yeah, it is a joint effort in that regard. But when it comes to any action around the committee, the board has really has no legal authority or authority of a charter to intervene on issues like this. If it was a board committee, certainly we can do things like censure and, I can change our own committees. That's not the case here. And it's absolutely not a cop-out. It's just letting folks know that, there's folks who didn't either voluntarily leave that committee, I believe, or there's got to be something egregious code of conduct. And I'm not going to interpret for the town council. I'm not going to put them on the spot because all the discussions around this was an executive session. I am sure there's a reason why they chose the action they did. Only they can explain it. I think if we were in a similar situation and we're in executive session, we could barely talk about things too. So that being said, no, none of us are condoning what happened. None of us are telling the females to move on by any means. I often, say confront our bullies. We have great people on that committee. I think the best way, in my opinion, to put people in their place, so to speak, is get the job done. And, let's get it done for the greater good of our community. And that's not taking anything away from the situation. So it's a letdown for the board because this is now year 5, I believe, since we started the Facility Master Plan Initiative. And sometimes I quip that there's like a dark cloud hanging over any infrastructure project we try to do for schools. And this is like the 6th or 7th plan in probably 20, 30 years, and there's always something. So there is a greater good here, which goes beyond 1 or 2 people's involvement, and that's our community, our children, our stakeholders, our schools, and the people in this committee can get it done. We all have faith in the committee, so that's really all I have to say. Again, I've spoken with some committee members. I've talked to some town council members. So by and large, I don't want to berate this, but we're very much well aware. But I think, I don't want to speak for the rest of the board, but I think we still all have a lot of faith in this committee, despite what occurred. But that being said, I don't want to spend too much longer on it. I don't know if anybody else wants to add something. If not, you don't have to. Catherine.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into really specifics, but as a person who's been on the board for 6 years now, going on 7, and I was involved in obviously the facilities master plan that is being possibly reworked now. I am not at all confident that the committee, I don't know, I'm not confident, or I don't understand how the committee can move forward after watching, that the video of that meeting. And I hope that it is something that can be resolved, and months now, weeks and weeks have been taken up with an issue that really should have been dealt with, I think, a while ago. And I just have to say that I think that the members of the committee who are not elected officials deserve more, and even the ones that are elected officials deserve better. We should have a functioning, really well functioning group of people that can work together and get things done. And so I'm just saying that, and it's worth not even $1.25 for a cup of coffee. So that's how I feel.
I would add to that, Catherine, and say the committee deserves more than to just be functioning. We deserve to have the collegiality of a committee, and that has been lost over this incident. It can be repaired, and actually, Tony and I had a discussion today on the phone, and I think he's come up with a pretty good idea. And I don't know if we want to address it here tonight with our time constraints, but I would like, Tony, why don't you let me know?
Yeah,
Should we proceed with this by just, talking about it?
I think what I like to do is, because really we are squeezed for time, and I want to get through the school reopening stuff. Is, again, that was an idea I've been talking with you. I thought might be worth talking about. But I would say I'll reach out to individual board members after the meeting and just give them a heads up of what I was thinking. But let them noodle over it over the next week or two, and maybe by the next meeting, if it's something that we want to talk about, let's bring it up and have a dedicated discussion there. But again, it's nothing earth-shattering. But it dawned to me today in our conversation, maybe something we want to worthwhile. So I don't want to do it tonight. It's not on the agenda, but I did want folks to know that the board has been thinking about the situation. We've talked individually. We're certainly aware of it, and we'll do the best we can. But we still support the committee, no doubt. The people on there, especially the volunteers, doing great work. So that's all I really have to say on it. I'm sure we'll discuss it further in the next meeting.
I would just say quickly also, Tony, I don't consider myself a politician. I'm an elected official.
Yeah, it's we all are.
If I'm considered a politician, I'm a really bad one.
No, exactly. We're all elected officials. It's just when I hear people say, "Well, that's politics." Sorry, you can't have bad behavior be excused by politics, and that's not what this is about. So that's a good point. We are elected officials. Thank you, Ann. That being said, I don't have any more on a matter. I just know it is fluid. Unless the board has something else on it, I'd like to move on to the next topic. Okay, thank you. Unless I'm missing it. Sorry, just checking the chat. Approval of minutes. This is going to go quickly, and then we're going to move right on to the superintendent's update with a little more detail on the school reopening. So in our packets, we have minutes from our June 4th business meeting, our June 29th special meeting, our June 30th fiscal business meeting, our July 14th special meeting, and our July 29th meeting. Unfortunately with COVID, we've been very busy on our items. We never got back to this. I went through the packet. I don't have any changes to the meeting minutes. Does the board have any updates or changes to those meeting minutes? Seeing as there are none, would someone like to make a motion to approve those meeting minutes? It is in our linked packet. Andrew, please.
I'd like to move that the Board of Education approve the minutes for meetings held on June 4th, June 29th, June 30th, July 14th, and July 29th, 2020.
Thank you, Andrew. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Catherine. Discussion? Seeing there is none. The motion is move that the Board of Education approve the minutes from meetings held on June 4th, June 29th, June 30th, July 14th, and July 29th, 2020. All those in favor, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. Thank you, team. Moving on, correspondence. Jeff, have we received anything that we want to address now, or wait until your superintendent?
I think we could cover it in the next section.
Okay. And for the public, just in case if you're tuning in or if you've been brave enough and hung through the last 2 hours and 24 minutes, we are now heading into superintendent's report. We just wrapped up our finance committee and correspondence section. We're going to get some more detail around our school opening and some response to the COVID emails. So that being said, Dr. Sullivan, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of quick ones. Things like, Mr. and Mrs. Bellinger asking about why aren't we taking a day off during the week to do thorough sanitation? And do we do background checks if we're hiring individuals in the elementary schools? We background check every individual that we hire. And we opted rather than take days off, we've hired additional staff, as Mr. Massiana has said, during the day, and we sanitize at the end of every day so that the buildings are thoroughly cleaned daily. I had a question. I apologize that I can't remember who it was from, but it was about the school start date and the concern that perhaps we'd be pushing back our date again. You may have heard that there was a request for that. I think that really pertains more to districts that were starting before Labor Day. I think we were kind of ahead of that. And now we're, I wouldn't say a late starting school, but we're toward the later end after the orientation. I don't foresee us changing unless the governor makes us. So with that, I know there were a number of questions relating to the more recently released plan from the high school. And I asked Dr. Gadd to put together a quick presentation to provide some more context around that plan. I know Adam had some questions, so hopefully this should address those questions, and I turn it over to Dr. Gadd.
Good evening, everyone. So I have some additional information. I hope you can see what is on my screen. Yes? Okay. So I'm offering you some additional information about our reopening plan, our opening with a collegiate hybrid model. I wanted to take you through a few of the rationale behind our move to the hybrid model. So the factors that contributed to the development of our plan were certainly population. We've talked an awful lot about cohorting, room capacity, and the use of mitigation strategies, mask wearing, sanitizing, cohorting, and social distancing. So in the process of putting our plan together, we pulled together 3 teams: health and safety practices and logistics, teaching and learning, and social and emotional considerations for the return to school. And I'd like to thank our departmental leadership, the CHS administrative team, our teachers, certainly our building maintenance and custodial crew. They've been extraordinary through all of this. Mr. Massiano talked about moving furniture. They did an extraordinary job in the high school, and we have over 100 classrooms, so you can imagine. Our school nurse, our foods and nutrition department, for all of them for their collaboration on putting together the plan. It's been quite a process. So as we looked at the hybrid model, and you've heard us discuss cohorting, just to give you some context about the school, our daily total population on a regular day, right? We're adding together our students, adults, and visitors. So that brings us to upwards of 1,600 folks in the building, potentially on any given day. Individual class sessions that students take, and I put together our year-long classes, so those classes that students are enrolled in from September to the end of the year, and then semester 1 classes, it brings us to about 1,046. And for all students at the high school, they're enrolled in 6.5 credits. So the combination between 6.5 credits, and some take many more than that, electives, advisories, all of the transitions that happen in a day, that really represents a total of 16,260 enrollments. And we have multiple grades within class sections. So why am I sharing all of that? Well, that is part of the reason why we have some powerful challenges, logistical challenges. So why would we do a hybrid instead of a full reopening? It's because we would need to move nearly 1,600 people through 11-foot wide hallways 6 times a day. Actually, more than that, 8 times a day, if you count lunch waves to and from. Providing 6 feet of social distancing for students to eat lunch unmasked would be an extraordinary challenge with over 1,300 students. And really the extreme difficulty, if not impossibility, of cohorting, given the complexity of the schedule that I shared with you, but also just the number of students in the building to contact trace. It would be very difficult to determine who was where when. So we also put together in our plan a block schedule as we began to consider all of these factors that made utilizing the mitigation strategies difficult. We came up with a block schedule so that we could, these were some of the ways that we could reduce students in large numbers together. So our block schedule enables us to maximize instructional time, first of all. So we would move to 80-minute, we are moving to 80-minute classes, allowing for 10 minutes between classes. So having 4 periods certainly limits transitions to go from a 6-period day to a 4. It allows us time for mask breaks. Mr. Perugini was talking earlier about being in a meeting wearing a mask. We've all recently had those experiences. The more we're back together, and it's challenging. So we're building that in and looking to take those outdoors as often as we can, weather permitting. The schedule and combined with the collegiate hybrid model allows us to connect with students in smaller groups. It also we were able to increase passing time. What I was talking about earlier that I shared with Mr. Grippo, that we would be splitting the 50% population that's in the building at a given time. So even fewer students would be in the hallway, and we would be able to move students after each period in waves. Some more clarification about the hybrid, and this has been a question that's come up. Actually, let me back up to the daily schedule. Dr. Solon just had the question about the sanitizing Monday. Why are you sanitizing, not having a day off to sanitize in between? And another question that we had was, why aren't you alternating students and sanitizing in between? Why are you doing a Monday, Tuesday? Students are in on Monday, and then a different cohort of students is in on Tuesday. We're doing that because in the hybrid model, that allows us to teach the same periods Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday remote, students meet all of those periods, and then Thursday, Friday, that same rotation of periods meet, so that if students are home, for example, on their self-directed learning day, if they're in on Monday and they're home on Tuesday, they can they can access a synchronous live stream class potentially if the technology is available. Teachers are going to make every effort to see their students as much as they can. We don't have, as Mrs. Solano was talking about, we don't have technology for everyone to simulcast in every class, but we are investigating workarounds utilizing available technology so that students can participate as continuously as possible. But students are going to be doing some self-directed learning on those off or alternate days. But that learning is at the direction of their teachers. So by bringing one cohort in on Monday and the next half of the same class in on Tuesday, it allows, where we can, for that overlap where students can reconnect with their teachers should they have any questions or need clarification. I also wanted to share that our school is linked very much to other schools in our DERG and in the Southern Connecticut Conference schools, of which we are a part. So out of 20 DERG B high schools, 19 of our fellow high schools are following a hybrid model, and one is returning for full-time in-person learning. In the Southern Conference schools, of the 23 high schools, and some of those districts have 2 high schools, 14 are following a hybrid. One school is in for just a half day, 5 days a week. 5 schools are returning full part-time. 3 of those are parochial schools, and 3 schools in the conference have not yet made a decision. And of all available data from Fairfield County, all of the Fairfield County high schools are returning following a hybrid model, similar to Cheshire. And I wanted to share that clarifying information as there have been some questions about and some concerns about will students be behind? Will there be impact on college acceptance? And so at some of the most competitive high schools in the state, we're all looking at a hybrid model for many of the reasons that I shared. I don't want to speak for every other district, but for many of the reasons I shared, high school populations, especially regarding our schedule and the transitions and the participation in classes at multiple grade levels, does make cohorting extremely challenging. So in terms of colleges and universities have certainly altered their criteria, given that schools across the nation have been impacted and traditional in-person learning has been deeply impacted nationwide. Many colleges and universities have gone standardized test optional, and I've given you some examples: Yale, UConn, Wesleyan, Trinity, Southern Connecticut, and Western Connecticut, and they all confirmed in August that they are definitively going standardized test optional. And I've included a link there that's live that when I share this with all of you, you'll be able to access, that just share all the schools across the nation that have gone standardized test optional. And in terms of post-secondary planning and any of the impact potentially, if this is a concern for parents, and some questions have indicated that, Cheshire High School continued to use letter grades for the end of last year. So colleges certainly have more definitive information about the students that are applying to their schools. The NCAA has made shifts in requirements, offering exemptions. And interestingly, most colleges are employing a hybrid program for students who are returning this fall. So our students are able to experience a format very similar to what they might see when they head off to college. And so there are some, if you can imagine, within this extraordinary moment in time, some silver linings. So there was an article in Education Dive that talked about silver linings of students becoming more self-directed learners and better time managers when our high school age students are exposed to a hybrid model. And we've linked the article there. And some other silver linings. While in a typical schedule, our 3-day rotation, that is our usual schedule, students have about 168 minutes per class. In our collegiate hybrid model, under the burden of this extraordinary pandemic, we have 110 minutes of in-person or the day of remote learning combined for a single class. potentially on the alternate days when students are learning at home, they can log into their class if there's a synchronous option available to them. And again, we are working to ensure that that can happen as often as possible. Students could then potentially have an additional 80 minutes, so we would exceed the typical schedule minutes. Again, the hybrid model, which is why we call it a collegiate hybrid model, it mirrors college-style schedules. And the last piece, and this is some of what Maura Esposito was talking about, it would increase the probability for us to be able to pivot more readily to an in-person schedule. And as you heard, kind of the through line from Mr. Triffone's presentation to Ms. Esposito's presentation to mine, if we follow the rules, if we follow the guidelines, if we continue to do what we know is right, and we pay close attention to how we're managing within our buildings, hopefully we will be able to enjoy a full return, to get back to some semblance of normal. It might not be tomorrow, it might not be at the end of October, we don't know when, but we certainly will be reevaluating. And as you know, we're working in close contact with Chesprocott and the health organizations, public health. So, any questions for me?
Not all at once.
I do.
Adam, I'm sorry, I just saw you. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Wasn't so much a question as it was Dr. Gadd, an appreciation. Because I had, even though I don't have a high school student, I did get feedback from parents, high school parents, about there was that little bit of hole in the hole in your presentation, which you just filled, which explains about how the students will remain competitive and what the collegiate model does about maintaining the rigor of the academics and the time spent, whether in person or remote, so that I think the parents can have a better confidence in the hybrid model for as long as we need to engage in it. And so I thank you for putting that together, and I hope that allays a lot of fears that the parents may have, and if not, then I'm again, feel free to email me and I'll find out more for you. Thank you, Doctor.
Yes, please everyone email Adam. That'd be great. Faith, I'm sorry, you're up.
Thank you, Dr. Gadd. Okay, so they're going to be getting 110 minutes of instruction. I'm sorry, I know I should know this. What is normal? What is the normal number of minutes?
56 each class. So the total for the typical week would be 168 minutes. We have an alternating schedule where, and it's complicated. We have a series of days, A, B, C, and D day. And so our typical classes meet 3 out of the 4-day rotation, which would translate into 168 minutes, give or take a few, because on advisory days, if that's, it takes about 20 minutes out of the day.
Okay. All right. So 110 minutes of instruction versus the 168. And I understand we're in a difficult time.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, I think what concerns parents is this notion of self-directed learning. For many, it's just a euphemism for 2 days of homework. And if you look through the report, at least the one that came out on the 14th, or that was linked in the letter on the 14th, there's no certainty that they're going to be able to get back in to observe a class. It has to be at the teacher's discretion. And I think there are a lot of parents who are concerned that their kids are, it's a wonderful opportunity to learn about yourself, but there are a lot of parents concerned that their kids are going to say, hey, I'm going to get my homework done and I've got 2 days off again, and we're going to be in that position. How are we going to hold these kids accountable? Are they going to be having attendance taken? I admit I'm a little concerned about it as well. It just seems like we're missing a huge chunk, especially, college assumes that kids have had high school, and to put a freshman in a collegiate model or even a sophomore raises big red flags for me.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's not teacher discretion. It's availability of technology and the ability to be able to simulcast with students. Again, we're trying to install systems in as many classrooms as we can. We'll have 15 at the high school, and beyond that, teachers can certainly utilize Chromebooks. They can, and we're looking at hopefully some other tools that can help teachers to simulcast more effectively if they can, because we realize that that's a concern, and a hybrid model is that dual model of both in person and remote. It's not perfect, but students are not, unlike when we were fully remote. Students are not at home and attendance is being taken, and they're not at home able to log in or not log in. And then there's a question of, did they log in? Were they part of the meet? They will be seeing their teachers. They will be in the building 2 times a week. So that's very different for us. And they are working under the direction of their teachers. So there will be more contact and more and very clear expectations of what students need to complete and how they can access support. Teachers also have office hours every day where students will be able to access direct help, or teachers can direct students to meet with them at a specific time should they be having difficulties or not participating in the way that they'd like them to.
Could I follow up with one question on the office hours? So it's 1 hour and 20 minutes of office hours per week, correct?
Mhm.
So how will a student, how will that work? The student will request a time during those office hours? Will it be a drop-in opportunity? Do you know how that's going to be set up for parents? Because I think that would be a big concern as well for
It
them.
would likely be a combination of all of the above, which teachers would work out with their students when they return to school. They'll be talking to them about, here's how that's going to work in our class and in this way, and here's how you get in contact with me.
Okay, thank you.
Anne, you have a question.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Dr. Gadd. My question is about, because we have this discussion and have been having this discussion since last year in the higher ed setting, which is there a combination of asynchronous presence as well as the synchronous presence? There are ways to hold students accountable by their activity that they're submitting, even in the online environment. If they're participating in, for instance, discussion boards, or if they're doing group work and they have to have assignments submitted at certain times, or students can show that they're engaged and working in ways that aren't face-to-face with their teacher. And I'm wondering how much of that is worked into any of the high school curriculum.
Teachers utilize that when we're fully remote, and they will continue to utilize those tools as well as we go into the hybrid model. And much of our opening days are about laying out exactly how that will work within each course. And they're gaining some vertical time in the 80-minute period as opposed to horizontal time. So they're going to be working together to determine exactly how they utilize that time. And so all of these tools to engage, to sustain engagement, and for students to demonstrate what they've learned and how they've mastered standards is precisely what we're going to be working on.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was writing down something I was going to ask, and I finished halfway through it and finished my thought. Again, thank you for the presentation. I did receive as part of a parent email from you today, and as Adam mentioned, filled in some holes, which is great. And for folks that are watching, as of 20 minutes ago, we still had 100 people hanging on. Thank you. You're troopers for hanging on that long. But do know that the communication you send us, whether it's directly to your principal or teacher, to the board members, administration, ultimately does end up to the folks in the trenches. So I hope that because we did get some just a little bit more details on, hey, can you please fill in some of these holes in the high school plan? And Mary, so thank you for getting right on top of that. And that's again, at this point, I think a lot of people in the public are just looking to see, have we covered everything? Is the communication happening? It is still fluid. I don't want to jinx us. Anything can happen between now and September 11th. But thank you. And I have a general question. It's not so much for the high school. It's we've been asked this quite a bit. Why not? And I know, Jeff, you probably answered this. It's probably in your emails there too. So we're doing a hybrid approach to high school. Got it. Check. I think it makes sense. But why not do that for the rest of the schools? Why would that not work? Is it a cost barrier or is it other? That's pretty much like in the top 5.
Yeah, the not doing a hybrid at the elementary level doesn't have anything to do with cost. The hybrid model we employed at the high school because we couldn't really effectuate any other mitigating strategies other than masks. At the elementary level, we're able to utilize masks, social distancing better, and certainly cohorting is more mentioned. The middle school, for example, has gone through painstaking efforts to group kids in classes by not only their team, but also what language are they in, what math are they in, so that they can remain in cohorts and teachers will be in many cases coming to them. Those strategies we can't apply at the high school level. And given the, in consultation with our medical advising group, that given the rate of the virus right now, those strategies, those mitigating factors are good things to have in place. And, as long as the numbers don't change, or represent a safe opportunity for our K-8 students to come to school every day. At the high school, we don't have those mitigating factors, which makes it much tougher.
Well, it's and I remember in the last meeting and some of the back and forth emails I saw you respond to, the idea between at all schools is less number of kids in the school, less contact. That's one of the options. But the smaller populations in our elementary schools, except for Dodd, a little bit bigger there. So the mitigation on all the kids there is being addressed by the very nature that you can space them out adequately enough with the cohorts where you can't really do that at high school unless you go hybrid there. So yeah. I know for a few of the questions on this, some had to do around student safety, but also teacher safety, which I know Maura addressed earlier and Mary talked a little about too. But is there any situation in the and I'm sorry, Mary, you mentioned earlier the number of classrooms at the high school that would have the classroom technology. I forgot that number. That would start out 15. With how many?
15.
Actually, 15.
Out of possibly 56 classrooms, I think we were targeting last time, or something around that.
Yeah, the district-wide is 56.
The question, where I'm going with this is, so where are the other 40?
Sure. Sure.
Happening? Is it mostly that you can't space out the classrooms enough, or is there other criteria?
We have one in every grade level in every elementary school in the district. So when students are electing remote learning in those schools, they should be able to access high quality audio and video of the room. The middle school has 7 of them, 4 in team situations, and a few more in other courses that they've identified. And we have 15 at Cheshire High School. The other thing that, as Mary was talking about additional technologies, Marlene had the challenge today of facilitating our new teacher induction program through the use of what's called a document camera. It basically is designed to just shoot down on the table take the video of the table, but it also has a built-in microphone. So we were using that as kind of like a makeshift broadcast system, and we have 24 of those available. So we're looking at different strategies to provide that technology and try and put students who can't be in the room to the greatest extent possible.
Thank you. Thanks for that. And thank you, Mary. Adam.
I forgot my question, so I'm sure it'll come back. Thank you.
And I think you asked that you came in at 9:43 and 9:40. I hope I didn't skip over you. I don't think so. Any other questions for the boards? I think Jeff, Dr. Solomons get to the emails maybe around this, unless you want to present some more information.
Well, all I would say is, Mary, her presentation, like you guys were saying, addressed a lot of the questions that we had for tonight. Another one was music. What are we doing through the district as it relates to music? The state issued an addendum specifically related to music. So any sort of wind instruments where students are blowing into horns and things like that you have to have at least 12-foot social distancing. At the high school level, it's really disappointing and understandable, but disappointing nevertheless, that the organizing body for marching band competitions has canceled that season. So we're looking for a lot of virtual and socially distant small group opportunities for students to perform. I know that there are a lot of students who wake up every day and are excited to get to school because of music. So we're trying to bring classes outside to perform, but obviously those groups will be much smaller than they have been in the past. You can't have the full band. Students need to have like nylon covers over the end of their instruments if they're playing wind instruments. So there's a lot of detailed information. But again, our goal is to provide as much music instruction and opportunities as we possibly can under these conditions. So hopefully we can take advantage of the fall and get many students outside to be singing and playing instruments to the greatest extent we can. And then the last item I had was the Peck Jones grant. Marlene, if you want to update the group on that.
Sure thing. So the Peck Jones grant was put before the curriculum committee back in June. And just to refresh folks' memory, that was a request that really stemmed out of a couple of needs. One was the fact that in our budget this year, the line item for library books and periodicals, et cetera, had been reduced. The other was that when we went to a full day kindergarten model, our students began performing really well in reading and left us with a need to fill our primary libraries with additional high quality text at higher levels, higher reading levels. And the other piece was that we wanted to enhance reading materials at Dodd and at the high school relative to culturally responsive curriculum and be able to offer a diverse set of materials for our young adult readers. So that, I believe, was approved by the Board of Education, but was subsequently approved by the Town Council. The Peck Jones grant is part of a set of funds that has been set aside to support enhancements to the educational program. And we are allowed to make a grant petition to use that money each year. And it's roughly in the $20,000 to $25,000 range.
Thank you, Marlene. The responsive curriculum, especially around diversity,
Mm-hmm.
is not something that came out of nowhere. This is something that I know even the last curriculum committee was starting to work on this, and there was also a state mandate, if not mistaken, to introduce more of this. So this is gearing up to introduce into our curriculum. Is there a mandated date we need to have this in place by? Is it for the next school year, or is that at the discretion of local school districts?
So there is, and Mary can, I'm sure, chime in on this too, as well as Faith. There's some legislation that came down about Black and Latinx studies, and CERC is working on the curriculum for that course. And it's something that needs to be available to students. CERC is working on the curriculum so that it can be common across any school district that implements that. And we will be implementing, offering that as an elective. Mary, remind me, is that for the following year, correct?
It's an optional item for next year, and for the subsequent year, it's mandatory.
Thank you.
It's a full year course with with a semester focusing on Black studies, with the second semester focusing on Latino studies.
Again, this was discussed in curriculum committee a few times earlier this year, and just refresh new board members, when we went to our new board member orientation last November, I think it was, or December, we spent a couple areas on this. So glad to see it's gotten approved, and thank town council for actually going to the Peck Jones. I know we try not to go there unless we have to, but I think that's been a very valuable asset to the community, having that grant available to us. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Jeff, I had a question on your presentation. Can you talk about survey results, or is it too early?
Yes. Yeah, I apologize.
No, don't apologize.
I thought I had written it down and didn't say it. So the survey results that we have to date, maybe Mary could elaborate on the high school. I don't have as good a sense of that as they were in progress, but across K through 8, I would say roughly 85% in person, 15% remote. Mary, I don't know where you guys are right now.
The last I checked the survey, it was about 11-12% remote, and so that would make it roughly 88% for the hybrid model.
Does that remain fairly consistent since the initial survey, more or less?
Yeah, it has. It's very close to when we surveyed everybody back in July.
Did we see an uptick in parents opting to homeschool?
We didn't ask homeschool in July, but we have more homeschools than we ever have. I would call the number less than 20, though. I'll get more information on that.
Yeah, I know board has some clear information. I know that the high school is still actually should be closing out tomorrow, if not mistaken, correct?
Right.
Correct. If I can take this moment just to plug, if you haven't finished it, please finish it. We're going to be closing it tomorrow by 5 p.m. And as of right now, we have 900 responses. So that's wonderful. And we are holding pretty steady. Now we are at 86% are looking at hybrid, and now 14% are looking remote. Yeah, the last I had checked it. So that we got a lot of responses today.
That's great. It's great to hear. And thank you, all parents and students, for filling that out. It does help a great deal in the planning, because I know those responses are critical in planning the classrooms, the remote learning aspect, and working around that. So again, thank you, everyone. Jeff, was there anything else you wanted to?
No, that's it. Thank you. I'm bored. My own, presentation is so boring. I apologize.
No, it's incredibly short.
Yawn through it. Yeah, so this would bring in the ringers.
Again, in all seriousness, thank you, and thank you for the public for hanging in there. Is there any other correspondence? I'm sorry. Actually, I want to. Adam, you had a question before I move on. I'm sorry.
I did. Have we heard anything from the teacher side? Like, do we know how many teachers are coming back?
Vin, you want to talk about that process and also address Tim's question on busing?
Okay, the busing, I'll do that first because it's a little bit easier of an explanation. So the state's guidance on buses is that we can run buses at full capacity, and this update is no different than we had provided last time. We've planned all our routes though at a maximum of 50 students per bus. So 70 is the capacity. We've planned the routes at 50 to the extent that we've planned routes at 50, and let's say it's 12% of students will be remote. That will reduce the number of students on the bus from 50 down to, whatever that relevant, percentage winds up being. So, we may be in some cases buses at 50% of capacity. The requirement clearly is students must wear masks on the bus. Driver must wear their mask while they're driving. To the extent we have any aides on the bus, they will be wearing masks. And any student is attempting to board the bus without a mask, the bus drivers and aides will have masks to hand to the children so they can wear their mask.
I want to be clear though on the numbers on the bus. The 45 whatever students that are on the bus, we haven't backed out the people who said I'm going to be driving my child, and we still have 45 on the bus. So as Vin said, we'll have remote learners, which would take off a certain percentage of bus riders, but also those who have elected to drive for a drop off or pickup. And I want to thank the Cheshire Police Department, who's been working with our principals to support drop off and pick up at the end of the day, because we expect a lot more vehicle transportation, which is a nightmare and a good day.
Okay, so that's the bus question. With respect to, it's not, I'll answer a question. It's really not so much teachers coming back, but it's all staff, returning to work. This has been a multi-step process. We had sent out a survey to all our employees in July, asking them, after we explained what our plan would be on a high level, would they be able to return to work? And then, we've received about just under 100 responses where the employees indicated they were unsure or said that they couldn't return to work for a variety of reasons. And then we took from that group, we followed up and sent each of those employees a very detailed explanation of what their leave options might be or what their accommodations could be. So as of today, and we still are getting some formal written requests, from our staff for either leave or accommodations. We've fielded many calls and many emails beyond the 63 formal requests we've had, and we've responded to all those requests formally. We've worked closely with our attorneys on the responses to those employees, and that process is still ongoing because it is multi-step. So there's really three basic categories of solutions for an employee who can't return. The first is under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which was enacted obviously in response to COVID-19. That does allow employees to have one of three potential leave types. If the employee has COVID, or they went to a state and are now mandated to quarantine. So employees get up to 10 paid sick days, COVID-19 leave under this particular act. If they have a family member that they need to take care of under those same conditions, they would get 2/3 pay. So if the employee has it, they get 100% pay for 10 days. If they have a family member they're taking care of, they would get 2/3 pay for 10 days. And then the third available leave option under that particular act is, to the extent an employee has childcare issues because either their child's school is closed or their daycare is closed, they can have up to 12 weeks of what's essentially an add-on to the Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA. So that is a leave option only in the event that their child's daycare or school is closed. The second potential leave option is traditional FMLA. FMLA is typically unpaid. It's up to 12 weeks. It allows the employee to retain their position for when they come back, and it keeps them on medical benefits. And then the third category, which is pretty broad and a little bit more complicated to navigate against, and that is if an employee has a qualifying disability, they have rights under the Americans with Disability Act to have a reasonable accommodation granted. So of the 63 written requests, most, I would say, fall into the ADA accommodation. The process, just kind of high level, is, we need to identify to the employees what we're doing in terms of safety measures, and then the employee has to, generally obtain a doctor's note comparing the safety measures, telling us from a doctor or medical provider's perspective where the employee has a disability and where those safety measures may not work, and then what those recommended reasonable accommodations are. What we've seen is that in quite a few cases, the accommodations being requested are to be able to teach remotely if it's a teacher. We do not have any remote teaching positions available at this time. So we're working through that process. I know that as we talked earlier with Maura Esposito and Dr. Solon, that we know employees are concerned. We're doing our best to work through the details, get information, provide information back to the employees, request a doctor's note. It is a laborious process. We are doing this with, our existing staff. We have, one human resources manager. We have one benefits specialist. So that's not a lot of people to call through that many requests. So we've been, staying late and getting them done. But, we have responded to everybody formally at this point. We're continuing to work through the process. And, I hope all our employees and, certainly our parents understand that this is not easy for anybody. We're going to do, everything we possibly can to keep not only, our students safe, but certainly our employees safe. We don't want anybody getting sick, but we also can't accommodate every request. So it's not easy, but we'll get through it like we do everything else.
Before I back up to Faith on the question on the transportation budget, then is there do we have any staff that are not going to return back to school because of COVID in general?
Well, we've had some employees that have decided to retire or resign because, they are either uncomfortable, they're elderly, we've certainly seen some of that. Some of the requests we've gotten are, FMLA requests, which, we've granted some. And whether or not those employees will come back after the 12 weeks, because, Family Medical Leave Act is 12 weeks. It's limited to that. And so I would say that as of this point, we've seen employees that, probably would have not retired that have retired. I would guess that we'll see some more of that as we get closer and closer to the start date of students.
And one last question on the EDA request. Is there, for any denials, is there an appeals process, or is it pretty much at that point, once the request is denied, that's the end of it?
Well, there isn't, I guess what I'll say is this: an employee always has a right to make a second request if they're not satisfied with the response that we gave initially. And then the other piece that I'll add is if the employee, if the employee's request is to be able to teach remotely, and this links to the survey that we were just talking about, rather than having the teacher teach remotely as an example, an accommodation may be, the teacher is in the classroom and the students, if there are enough, may be remote. So, in that event, the teacher would be in a room without other students in it and be able to broadcast, to the students. That may be a reasonable accommodation. But at the end of the day, to answer your question, Tony, yeah, if we say, this is the reasonable accommodation we can supply, and there really isn't a lot of recourse beyond that the employee can have in some cases.
Thanks, Vin. And I want to just back up to Faith. Faith, you had a question about the transportation budget earlier?
Yeah, sorry, I just didn't type fast enough. I know I should know this, Vin, by reducing the bus, the number of kids on the bus, that increases. What's that going to do to our transportation? That's my finance question, Adam.
Yeah, okay. Reducing the capacity or the number of riders on the bus doesn't change the cost. We basically pay per bus run day. So,
Okay.
we're still going to run the buses the same number of buses, probably for about the same hours, even though there's less passengers per bus. The only place that we may see some savings is if ridership goes low enough that we might be able to eliminate a route against all three tiers. Because remember, we're running elementary, middle, and high school. So the only way you save a full bus run day, which is, if we could do that, it's about a $50,000 savings per year, but it would have to be across all three tiers of the runs. So, and that's something we always, look to do year in and year out. If we have that opportunity, we'll certainly take advantage of it, but I don't see that as a cost savings opportunity right now with decreased ridership alone.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I was actually thinking it was going to bump up our prices because, or our expenses, but I wasn't looking for savings, but I was just curious.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
I think that's the rebound effect that Tim typed in the comments, if not mistaken. Any other questions from the board? Ann, yes, please.
Yeah, Vin, I'd be interested to know why there are not more opportunities for a high school teacher to teach remotely.
I'll let Dr. Solon address that.
Sure. Yeah. At this point, we have not worked through the process entirely. The high school survey isn't even over yet. So I don't know exactly what exists. What we're asking people to do is these are and this is pretty typical, as guided by our attorney. These are the precautions that we have in place. Your doctor needs to indicate if there are other accommodations that would support your ability to work in the building. And then we get that information back and make decisions. And that, unfortunately can take a little while, and we're still working through that, in addition to finding out how many students do we even have remote. So we haven't ruled out, as Vin said, that option. We just don't have it right today.
Great, thanks. I would appreciate more an update down the road on that, because I think it's important, to the extent possible, that that we accommodate teachers who have medical conditions or compromised.
Yeah, an accommodation would mean you otherwise have to be able to perform the duties of the job. And one could argue that one of the essential duties of being a teacher is, being in the classroom to manage that group. Now, if the group is remote, that's a completely different argument. But, we're evaluating each situation on its face value. And I will tell you, and I've said this to the union repeatedly, that, specific to teachers anyway, that the best people to teach our students are the people that we hired to do that. And I could get a substitute, but that unfortunately, with all due respect to our substitutes, they're not trained and credentialed the same way our teachers are to step in and teach for 3 weeks or whatever the case may be. So
Yeah.
we want our teachers to be teaching our kids as much as they can in whatever form that takes. But we
Great.
follow the legal protocol and get through the.
Great. I understand that this is all a lot and that it's difficult. So I appreciate that you're working on that end
Sure.
of it too, because there are a lot of teachers out there that I've been talking to from elementary all the way through high school. They're also nervous, many of them, about being back, as Maura was discussing earlier in tonight's meeting. And I want them to know that they're important to this whole model that we're doing as well.
Yeah, obviously they're critical to our model, but also the functioning of our school system
Exactly.
from here on out, obviously. So something we're sensitive to.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Adam, did you have a question?
I did. Vin had mentioned, as the real school year gets closer, and there more teachers may decide to not teach. Even I have had moments of doubt as to whether or not to send my son or not. And though I have answered in the affirmative, it just that my son is going back in the survey. But if a parent had answered in the affirmative or otherwise, and they have a change of heart as the day gets closer, do they have, is their answer, is that a commitment in the survey, or is there some sort of unofficial drop dead date where they could change their mind again, or
Sure.
as information becomes more clear one way or the other?
Yeah, for students, the families have the first 2 weeks where they could shift environments from whatever they've selected to the other. After that, we ask for a 4-week commitment. So, we can't have large percentages of our student population flipping back and forth and still effectively function as a school. So we have a 4-week enrollment lock, and then we'll open it up again and then go again. So,
but what if I answer one way right now, and then as it gets closer, before school even begins, to change my mind,
right?
Or am I committed at this point until day one? And then
our preference would be that you try and stick with it. I mean, if there's a real, if there's a concern for one reason or the other, you're better off contacting the principal and working through it.
Okay. And one last question, and this bridge is hopefully not too far, but pretty far, and that is vaccine.
Yes.
Right. When the time hopefully comes, when a vaccine is available, are we going by whatever state guidance is, or do we as a health district decide what our requirements would be for a student to be vaccinated as a requirement for anything?
Yeah. The state sets the law on vaccinations, so it's not a local or regional decision. My guess is that won't be the case next year, even at the earliest. So, yeah, that would be my guess, that it would not be legally mandated next year. Let's hope that it's available and everything's in a great position, that it might be an option for the following year. But I think it's, like you said, a bridge that's pretty far out there to think about the fact that we would have it mandated for next year.
And so it would be state.
It is state, yeah, it's statutory.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone. I don't see any further questions. Let me just check where we are on the agenda. I do want to apologize to Catherine. I skipped over correspondence. I got confused with the emails, but I do want to move to the correspondence. I think we have a few that were received, not necessarily related to COVID.
Oh, wait, can you hear me? Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have 3 letters, and in the interest of time, I will summarize them. The full copy of each of these letters will be circulated to all of the board members if they haven't already seen it, and be part of the minutes. But so the first letter is from Anne Marie and Neil Kemp, and basically questioning whether the hybrid model at the Cheshire High School is in the best interests of the high school students, and concern about the self-directed learning days. And I think overall the problem is that they think that the difference between the way the K-8 students are being handled and those in the high school, there's too much of a disparity. Hopefully, the Kemps have watched this evening's meeting and got answers to some of their questions, because a lot of what their concerns were, I think, were addressed during Dr. Gadd's presentation and Marlene Solano's presentations. We have a letter from Marlena Sobel, who actually, there's a letter that was written to the town council, and she also asked that it be entered into the record with the Board of Ed. Her letter relates to the School Modernization Committee and the issue involving Matt Bowman. Her concerns relate to the process and that was involved on the town council side in looking into this, and the lack of deference that was paid to the request of the committee to have Mr. Bowman removed from the committee. It's a very well-written letter, but I essentially, she also thought that the proceedings should have been in the public and not in the executive session by the town council. Finally, we have a letter from 5 different past town council chairs. Again, this has nothing to do with the Board of Education, so, but asking that we all as a community remember that our elected officials, we may not agree with what our elected officials do, but at no time should we be sinking to a level where we're attacking family members or basically, we should all just be bringing things to a higher level. It's a tough enough job to be an elected official, and so we should be respectful of especially town council chairs, apparently. And those are the 3 letters that we have as correspondence. And again, the full letters will be in the record.
Thank you, Catherine. Again, I apologize, I skipped over that earlier. No, there's no old business. There's new business. I don't have an update. I don't want to keep people any longer than I need to. But I do want to announce some upcoming meetings. And these are on our calendar on the Chester Public Schools website. And let me get to it. Let me at least read the next 2 upcoming ones. On Tuesday, September 1st, 2020, there will be a policy committee meeting at 6:30 in the central office boardroom. I believe that will be an in-person committee meeting due to the small size. We'll confirm. On Thursday, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, what happened? Oh, did I say?
I was just excited that we might be meeting.
Oh,
that's all. Sorry. I didn't know my mic was on.
I know I can't see everybody's. I got the agenda up, so I can't see the screen. I'm like, if I say something dumb, just point it out as everybody else does. The Thursday, September 3rd, 2020, there will be a board of ed opening of school. It's marked as TBD, and I'm not sure if that's because it's to be determined location or whether or not we're going to have it. Jeff, I don't remember, and again, it's getting 11th hour. I don't remember the rationale behind that.
Yeah, that's whether or not we're going to have it, because that's our opening of schools meeting.
Yeah.
Schools won't even be open. So we're trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I would leave it open because we, and I again, I want to thank the public and everyone here tonight for hanging in there for close to 3.5 hours. But if I would ask us to consider having that meeting, keep a placeholder in case there's more information that comes out between now and then, or more questions. And if it's easier for the board to have a short meeting to address reopening questions in a much shorter time frame, we can use that. But we'll play that one by ear. So that is to be deed for September 1st. September 14th, we have a clip and clear meeting at 7 p.m. And September 17th, opening of school business meeting, which is a little later than normal. Couple other worthwhile events to put out there is that on August 27th, we will have convocation, which I assume will be in a traditional manner with socially distanced responsibility happening. September 8th through the 10th, we have student orientation days, which we discussed at the last Board of Education meeting. Due to the delayed start of school, we're taking advantage of those 3 days. September 11th is the official first day for all schools. And then September 4th through the 7th, we have Labor Days. Labor Day with school closed, and September 28th, Yom Kippur, and schools will be closed. Again, this is all in our board calendar on our website. We have a possible executive session to discuss union negotiations, but seeing that we have not met at all since the outage, there's not much of an update, so I'm going to forego the executive session. However, I will reach out to folks individually to give an update. There's really not much to update. Jeff?
We actually did have one item on not the teacher negotiation, but a very quick item on the administrator one. If we
Thank you. Go back to the notes. So that being said, there is some information there. Thank you, Jeff. I remember that now.
Sorry.
So I'm going to ask for the board's patience to have a quick executive session. And so the motion is, I move that the meeting be adjourned into executive session to include Dr. Sullivan, Mr. Massiana, and Ms. Solano to discuss union negotiations with no action to follow. So for those, do I have a second?
Second.
Catherine had up first. All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you, everyone. For those of you watching, and Mike, I don't know how many are left. Thank you for hanging in there. This video will be up live on our school YouTube website. I don't know how to index the YouTube video, so if folks want to go to a specific section of the video just to listen to Dr. Gadd, there's no easy way to do that, I guess, unless someone actually watches the video and posts the time intervals where people give updates. We'll try to work on that, and I think during the meeting, for those of you that might tune in late, we will make the presentations available to the public for viewing. So that being said, I want to thank everyone. We're going to adjourn into executive session with no action to follow, and we will not be returning back to this meeting. So Mike, let us know when we're ready to go into executive session. Thank you.